OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
A very good morning to you. It's 7:30. It is Monday, the 19th of June, and the news this morning that you're waking up to is that Rory McIlroy is not the US Open champion. He finished a shot behind, and so disappointment for him. And all that remains for him to wonder whereabouts in our performance rankings does he fall this morning. Kathleen's here. Good morning to you, Kathleen.
Good morning. He's definitely still up and awake and is like tuning in, eager to hear.
Yeah, come on, lads. Stick me in the green. Come on, that's not no lobbying. I'll call him. Look at you. How are you?
How are you?
It's been a while. How are you?
It has. Hi, Kathleen. Hello, everyone.
We look so pale in comparison to you, Colin.
Yeah. Great to watch you from afar for 2 weeks.
I was, I'm sure. Yeah. Tuning in every day.
Every day.
Complaining about the intros and outros.
Every day. No, great to be back. Very pleased. Definitely happy to have worked today.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Wyndham Clark is the winner of the US Open. He won by a single stroke, finished 10 under par, closing round of 70. Rory McIlroy also a closing round of 70. Was not enough for him to be able to close the gap. He finished on 9 under. Scotty Scheffler finished third on 7 under. Cameron Smith had a good final round to get into fourth on his own. Tommy Fleetwood burned up the course yesterday with a 63 to get into also a share of fifth, and that was Min Woo Lee also finished fifth. After that, Ricky Fowler fell away with a closing round of 75, and that was really it. They were the main stories from the final round. But yeah, significant disappointment for Irish golf fans who might have thought that it was going to be an incredible day, an absolutely incredible day, given Leona Maguire, cold-eyed assassin, was a winner earlier in the afternoon. We'll get to all that a little bit later on. Big stories in the world of Gaelic football. Reports of the demise of Gaelic football have been greatly exaggerated. We'd love to hear from you this morning if you are celebrating, or if you are indeed a Galway fan or a Mayo fan or a Monaghan fan. Shane's not here. He's left an important part of his brain somewhere in a field and beyond the pale. And anyway, 087 918 180 is the WhatsApp number. You can get onto youtube.com/offtheball. We do obviously have to talk about the Republic of Ireland football team. We're going to get to that in just a moment. Is there anything anybody else wants to talk about before we get to the end of the Martin Tyler era? The
flight to Cyprus is way longer than I thought it was going to be. I assumed that most places in Europe are about 2 hours away, but I googled it, right?
Yeah.
And Cyprus is technically Western Asia.
Right.
Well, I only realised when I landed.
How long is the flight?
5 and a bit hours.
Oh wow, that is long.
And the problem with that time is it's not long enough to be entertained by the flight. There's no screens or anything like that, so you really have to. You're left your own devices.
You're with a budget airline.
Budget airline, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a lot. It's a long. That's a long time.
Turkish Air stick on a good L spread for you, and they don't even beep out the swear words in succession.
Is that right? Did you watch Succession on a plane?
Yeah, I was in Istanbul for the Champions League final.
Were you?
It was very close to.
Did you get caught Cyprus up in the alleged crowd trouble?
Alleged
that I heard.
Crowd trouble.
Or the problems beforehand?
Yeah.
Whatever it was.
We did a whole bit on a com.
Did you?
There's a good 5-6 minute clip of Ger taking us through pictures, videos, the whole lot.
Painstaking detail. I was like one of those 1980s families who makes you sit through the pictures of their holidays for 4 hours, and everything. Just give us the drink. Give us the drink.
What happened?
No, you can check back. Our audience are more interested in what happened with Ireland, who had similar difficulties. But Cyprus,
I heard. Yeah.
Would you recommend it?
I would recommend to a friend. It's very good. They're in the Euro, same sockets, everything. A lot of British people there, a lot. I couldn't believe it.
Right.
And outside of ourselves in our own group, I'd say I heard a handful of Irish accents. But it was mad because the plane from Dublin was completely full of all Irish people. So where'd they all go?
I always love that moment when you get a plane, say from Dublin, and you go to a foreign country and you kind of recognise everyone on the plane because you've spent enough time in queues and stuff studying them, and you feel like you know them a little bit, and then you get to wherever your destination is and everyone just kind of disperses off to do their own thing, and you're like, where are all these people going? What's their story?
Ideally they disperse off and you don't see them again for the holidays, but then sometimes you end up being stuck. We did one package holiday ever in our lives, and it was 20 years ago, never again, because we ended up on the plane with the same family who happened to be from Arkla and had big broad Arkla accents, and we were like, oh my god. So sorry, my wife's family is originally from Arkla, so she was allowed to Anyway, I'm getting myself in trouble with everybody here.
Hopefully no one's awake to listen in.
So there is actually loads of other stuff. Spain won the Nations League on penalties last night against Croatia. It looks like Declan Hannon is in doubt for the rest of the season from a Limerick perspective. We'll bring you more news on that. And Verstappen won the Grand Prix. So, I mean, that's obviously... Shane's not here to tell us that this was exciting because it was slightly unexpected because this and this. But anyway, you'll have to tune into the F1 pod for that. But at 7:35 this morning, it is time for the Gillette Labs performance rankings.
That wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it acceptable to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performances was just lacked that intensity.
Ooh.
Here we go. We're going into our performance rankings. So, as mentioned before, there's only really one place to start because we haven't had a chance to talk about this yet. Stephen Kenny's Ireland and that woeful performance on Friday evening. I was watching it with an American woman who asked me, do Ireland always play like this? So yeah, 13th loss for them from 23 competitive outings. We said for a lot of last week, we were like, if it's a loss and we actually put in the performance, we can see that there has been some sort of change, there's some sort of squad, but the general consensus over the last couple of days seems to be that this is possibly the worst Irish side that we have seen in a long, long time on the men's side, and that Stephen Kenny is in a little bit of trouble. We don't know what is going to happen with him next. He was speaking to the media yesterday ahead of tonight's game against Gibraltar, and he said on his contract situation, my contract is up to the end of the campaign, and whether it's renewed will depend on how people feel the campaign went overall, but I certainly fully expect it to be. So that's how he feels at the moment. He said he was very much focusing on Gibraltar tonight and forgetting the woes of Friday. But I think even when you listen to how the Greeks were talking about it and how obvious it was to them where all our holes and flaws were and how easy it was for them to target them, it's not a good place to be.
Our next fixtures obviously is Gibraltar tonight, and then after that in September, in a 4-day stretch, we're in Paris, and then the Dutch come to Dublin. So, I don't think there should be any knee-jerk reaction after tonight, really. But, it will require something remarkable from the games in Paris, and then you hope against the Netherlands in a full Aviva. I think the Gibraltar and Netherlands tickets were sold together. Is that correct? I'm fairly sure it was.
Yeah, I think so.
So if there's 40,000 there tonight, then you would expect that the ground will be fairly full for the Netherlands. Now, they'd need to beat Gibraltar and then beat France and then beat the Netherlands, I think, for them to be in a situation where everybody's like, oh, actually, you know what, maybe things have changed. But
it'd be remarkable if that happened.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not going to happen. So
I think we'd all be sitting here being like, that's the greatest comeback in Irish sporting history.
And even then, you'd still struggle to be getting out of the group because of the scenario that we find ourselves in here. So maybe you wouldn't if you were winning those games, but it's not going to happen. So that's the level we're at now, where it's like a miracle to get out of the situation, and it's desperately disappointing. Like there's no way of dressing this up. I did the game on Friday night in studio here with Finney Perth, and he was making the point that we got out-coached. Tactically, they were better than we were, and we didn't adapt quickly enough to it. We didn't make changes that we needed to make. And obviously, before the match, when the team was named, Finney was very concerned about the shape of the team. Last week when we were talking about it, he'd posited 3 potential teams, what he thought might be going through Stephen Kenny's mind. One of them ended up being the second half team where Mikey Johnson came on, and that shape was slightly better, but those first 15 minutes were just so bad. It was like a lack of leadership, a real misunderstanding about how to break the patterns of play. Nobody even managed to pretend that their contact lens was jammed in their eye. Nobody broke the pattern of us being completely overwhelmed, and that's why, listening to the press conference yesterday, Stephen Kenny's talking about the goals, but the goals didn't come in isolation. The goals came as a result of the pattern of play being completely one-sided in favour of Greece, and Greece so thoroughly dominated us that they were really unfortunate to only win the game 2-1. I mean, I think it's ridiculous that we have this Player of the Match award when we get beaten, but Bazunu was the Player of the Match, and like, I don't know, could anybody else have been given any semblance of like a mark?
I don't think so.
You know, a mark over 5 out of 10. So, and look, I get that the players were not at it because it's been so long since they played a game. Listening to Gary Breen and David Connolly, they were making the point that even a friendly against Bows or Rovers would have given the players timing, whereas in the 70-minute 11-a-side match that they played in Turkey, you're not going to go and crunch one of your teammates for fear that they get injured, because then he's out and you're definitely not getting picked because you're getting punished by the manager. So the timing of the players was off in the first half. And players who we think are good played really badly. Like the midfield was awful,
atrocious,
absent in that first half, and I think partly that was to do with the shape. I do think partly that was to do with the shape, but I also think that I don't know. So like at that stage, it appears as if you're making excuses for what happened, but you know, Greece had the same preparation that we had. Obviously played players in different leagues. Some of them had been off for as long as our players, and they didn't seem to bear the same issues. You know, you would say Simica's touch looked pretty good for somebody who's not a first choice player at his team. Now obviously he's at a much higher level than any of our players.
But it's also the fact as well that like such a big deal was made before this game of like the fact that Stephen Kenny had given the squad time and they had time together to get themselves up to speed, and that they had been working really hard and they'd been working on different tactical formations, and that, you know, the newer players that we're still discovering, the likes of like Mikey Johnson and stuff, that they had been integrated into the squad in maybe a way that it felt like everyone was on a similar page in a different way to how they were before. And then when they came out, like you were saying, those first 15 minutes, it was like a group of people who had never played together before. They just looked so off the pace, so off where they should be at this stage. And like I was reading a lot of stuff over the weekend of people saying that, you know, it's a bad team and it's the worst crop of players we've ever had, and the, you know, FAI certainly to blame for part of that in terms of how we've developed over the last couple of years. But also I don't think we're as bad as we actually did play on Friday, and that's the frustrating thing, the fact that the entire team got totally outplayed, outthought, you know, tactics, whatever it was, by Greece in a way that we shouldn't be, I don't think anyways. And I'm not saying that to put like a positive spin, because I don't think you can put much of a positive on Friday.
I think there's a twin track to this, right? And both things are true. The tactics were wrong, and that is the result of the manager making those decisions. And also what Liam Brady said, I think, is also true. This is the worst group of international players that we've had potentially ever, right? Like going back in football history, we always had players who were considered amongst the very best in our league, which was really good up until the 40s and 50s, and then all our best players uniformly went across the water, and at that stage we had players in all the best teams in England. So it doesn't feel like we are producing players who are capable of running a game or understanding. And look, maybe that's because we're not picking them. Maybe we have to just go back to kick and rush. Is that what everybody wants? Back to the Martin O'Neill and the second Mick McCarthy era and the end of trap? Is that like, so we just need to be careful what we wish for here as well. Like you can get Big Sam and Robbie Keane in, you can do that, and you can be guaranteed that we'll be as exciting to watch as Leeds were in their final 3 games of the season.
I don't think the Stephen Kenny naysayers want to go back to kick and rush football. They just want to go to major tournaments and have memorable moments, and it feels at this moment that we're just a million miles away from that. It was interesting that he picked Will Smallbone here as the first start. This match was such a huge game, and everyone saw this game in advance that Greece away was going to be the game. Presumably that was because of the partnership that he and Matt Doherty developed against Latvia in that friendly, that 3-2 win just before the France game. And also, you're talking about fine margins here. Remember Nathan Collins' header at the end of the France game? That was for 1-1.
Yeah.
And if that had been converted, because I remember the morning after here we were fairly positive about Ireland's display, very disappointed to lose, but fairly positive, and now we're back to this again, and it feels like we're always going back to this place with Stephen Kenny. I think after that result, and particularly performance against Greece, I think it's all over for Kenny in terms of goodwill and and his future as Ireland manager. So, for example, they win tonight, doesn't really matter unless they absolutely obliterate Gibraltar, and even then, it doesn't really matter.
I don't think. Like,
and then the Dutch and France double headers. Like, maybe if they probably have one valiant display where they narrowly lose and maybe get a point against the Dutch, right? So say that happens, they play well twice. I still think it's not enough. It won't be enough. And even if they won twice, it'll be the next round of fixtures, which is again going to be Greece and Gibraltar. If it's a draw at home to Greece, I told you so. And he's had too many I told you so's, Kenny.
Oh no, there needs to be like a miraculous run of results now, which is better than any run of results we've had in Irish football history, and we don't have the players to do that. And look, it does appear as if the manager is struggling to get the best out of these players, and that's the bit that I was hopeful wasn't going to be the case. I was hopeful that he was coming up with a style that suited us, that was interesting to the football public, that was progressive, and that allowed us to get into games, which we could all get behind. And that unfortunately has not been the case. It has been good results followed by really bad results. Like, if you look at the divergent path from Ireland hammering Scotland that time, and where Scotland have gone on to from then to now, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, if Ireland were to play Scotland in the morning, I would expect Scotland to hammer us the way Scotland are playing at the moment and the way Ireland are playing. And yet, we just, this time last year. So I don't know.
And we haven't even plateaued at any stage. It's been very up or very down. There's been no point where it's just kind of been like, this is steady. We're like slightly climbing. Maybe we might drop a little bit against certain higher up teams and then like slightly climbing again. It's just been like, whoop, whoop.
Yeah. But also they don't get hammered, Kenny sides. So we're in this eternal purgatory about where is this team actually going. And it's kind of down. But if they were getting blown out of it game after game, he'd already be gone, like.
Oh,
it's it's the fact that he's constantly staying in there. And also I think what frustrates people about Kenny is he's a big defender of his side, especially in the media, like, especially talking afterwards. And again, he's still seeing the green shoots of the performance at times against Greece, and how, okay, he said they were insipid, but that they were always in the game. And like, that really infuriates people, especially people who don't want him in the job. So like, ideally people want him to come out and say like, we're as terrible as everyone's saying. And obviously he's not going to do that.
No, and I think that's the right thing for him to do too. Yeah. You know, like, for whatever, Stephen Kenny has been very true to his core beliefs, and I've no doubt that whatever experience he takes from this into the future is going to be very valuable for him as a football manager. It's very difficult to see a way in which he's going to get another campaign. I do think that they shouldn't prevent him from taking that next double header, for example. I don't think that makes any sense. Somebody was saying, you've got to give somebody a new opportunity to bed in before the following campaign. I mean, they don't have a huge amount of money in the FAI. We know that. I'm sure they'd be able to find money for something if they thought that something was out there on the list. On the lists that are being made now of potential replacements, Lee Carsley's name has bubbled up to the top. John O'Shea's name is there. He's obviously part of the backroom team. Roy Keane's name is there. Big Sam, because of his link with Robbie Keane at Leeds, has come back into people's reckoning. And
to manage Limerick.
Yeah,
that's his thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously it would be the single most important aspect of his entire managerial career if he was to get the job. And so, obviously Chris Hughton, who is not pulling up trees in Ghana at the moment. Phil was saying he follows some Ghanaian journalists on Twitter outside, and that the perception there is that the football isn't particularly enjoyable either. And that was the case. It has been the case. Like, a very competent manager. But like,
the thing with all those managers, they'll all have the same group of players. And looking at the Greece team as well, it's like a very good development 11. Or back in the day, you'd have your A team. Like the England days in the mid-90s, to see who's going to get picked, the last remains of a World Cup squad. Like, it's quite exciting, but it's an exciting team for the future, largely. And then ideally you're like, well, there's surely another set of 11 that can play. But that's the utmost of what we have.
The Francie Brady says, whatever you think of them, experienced, successful coaches like O'Neill, Trapp and Mick told us the players weren't good enough, but we said, no, they were the issue. It turns out they weren't the issue. I don't think you can be the manager of a team and tell the players they aren't good enough and expect them to somehow put in great performances. You just can't. And I think that's the bit here that, like, if our response to what's gone on here is to go, we need a hard ass who comes in and tells us all we're shit, it's like, well, okay, let's just massively throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Like,
I think it's interesting. A lot of the comments that are coming in this morning, they're like people who say they're active Kenny supporters and have been, but found like Friday really tough, or found the last couple of days really tough to defend him. A lot of what they keep coming back to is we can totally appreciate what Kenny has done in terms of the players he's brought in, or what he has done for certain players, but maybe now is the time to move on to something where we're not getting caught out in like a tactical sense in the way that we were on Friday. And they're like, again, they're not trying to do down on Kenny and like appreciate his legacy, but then also opens up the question of, well, then what is the next step? Do we have someone who can actually take us to the next level?
Yeah, well, like whenever Stephen Kenny goes, then we'll have the question of which legacy would you prefer? Like, would you prefer Martin O'Neill's tenure at Ireland, which ended so negatively, that friendly against Northern Ireland and barely anyone showed up? Would you like that legacy where he had that moment at Euro 2016? Or would you prefer Stephen Kenny's, where we didn't really get anywhere on paper, but he did try fundamentally change the way Ireland played football? And oftentimes it wasn't clearly apparent.
If Martin O'Neill had left after the Euros, I think he would have had a second and third life as a manager in English football on the back of that. But he stuck around for the following campaign. We got annihilated. That's what happened there. Like getting out of a group in a tournament is an all-time Irish football legacy, right? But that team played reasonable football, and we actually had a midfield who was playing football. Like I do wonder, it's not true that other managers would have the same players. Other managers would have had Jeff Hendrick and Robbie Brady in the team against Greece. Would they have made a difference? Like, are people saying that would have been fundamentally better than Malumbi? Maybe. Do you know? Like, I don't know. But I guarantee you that Mick wouldn't have had the same team at all. Like, those centre backs, I don't know, would Nathan Collins have been in the team? Maybe. We would have been playing 4-4-2 more than likely, and I'm fairly sure that James McLean would have started probably on the left wing. I mean, Matt Hardy, obviously he can play left back, we were told after that half in Gibraltar. So look, I don't know.
And they still could have lost 2-1.
We're down the rabbit hole here.
You know, they still could have, but it would be more recognisable because the team would be pretty obvious and no frills. Whereas this team that Stephen Kenny picked was straight away being like, oh, that's risky, straight away. So that's the difference, really. And like, I'm seeing one comment like Martin O'Neill's tenure is objectively better. It was like because he had the Euro 2016 moment, but like he had no interest at all in developing Irish football. It was just getting results, which is what he would say he was paid to do. Didn't care what was coming through, but he was able to provide results. Kenny's pretty much the opposite.
All right.
Is there a thing where like he's brought us to a space where he's changed the way we play football, he's changed the way that like we have approached football in the way we have the last couple of years, and okay, that's not a successful route for us now, but depending on who they get in next, and if they get someone in that kind of applies the same theories to Irish football but actually has the tactical skill to bring it along a little bit forward, this is like a longer term project that there was just too much for Kenny to fix.
The difficulty is that we have in human history watched most football organisations do the exact opposite next of what they had done previously, so there's never a sense of hopeful. Building on top of it, you know. So, and look, that's the difficulty here, is that like Kenny took on the ambition of changing how we were perceived, and at the moment we are not perceived as particularly difficult to play against, and Greece didn't find it difficult to play against us. So anyway, that is in the red. Stephen Kenny's Ireland is in the red, and it is a long precipitous climb back to
great motivation for him though. Imagine that. What are you thinking now? Basically everyone hates his team. Like,
well, I don't hate his team. I don't hate his team. I think
and everyone's
dying for it
like,
to work.
You're no good, get out of here. Imagine him sitting with those thoughts the whole time. It's a great motivator, like.
Yeah, or it ruins you.
Yeah, it very much depends on the sort of person that you are.
I would say
we now know what sort of person Colm is.
I think he's the former.
Can I just, people are saying, Big Sam doesn't play hoofball. At Bolton, he had like Yuri Djorkaeff, and he had Ivan Campo and JJ Okocha. We don't have those players.
Yeah.
We don't have those players. We've got Josh Cullen. Like, you know, he has been really... It was a terrible mistake against France, which cost us a fairly famous and a very important start to the campaign. And then he was completely anonymous. Himself and Malumbi were both anonymous, and I think playing Will Smallbone was actually a symptom of Stephen Kenny getting in his own head a bit too much and not doing the thing that had got him to this point. It was like, okay, this is going to offer us more opportunity, but Will Smallbone's not ready for Broadway just yet. Like, 1.5 season in the championship was not enough. Anyway, look, leave it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
Hopefully tonight we will have a better result. Also in the red, we have Connacht football after all the teams that were playing at the weekend lost. Some of them less expected than others. Obviously, Dublin absolutely hammered Sligo, which was a little bit expected. Well, it was very expected. I'm trying to make myself feel better about that one by saying that. Armagh got a famous win against Galway. There was very nearly a Shane Walsh free at the end that went over. If it had gone over, it would have been a draw. Roscommon losing to Kildare. I mean, the final moments of that game were absolutely sensational. And then Mayo as well, getting that surprise defeat against Cork. Once again, not turning up. But the Kevin Feely grab for the mark at the end. In the
score of the year so far. But we'll talk about that. He's going to be in the green.
Yeah, exactly. It was a beautiful moment. But yeah, not a good weekend for any of those sides from Connacht. I mean, for Mayo, it means that they have to go the roundabout way into the quarterfinals if they want to be able to get there. A couple of weird decisions from them in that one, particularly Aidan O'Shea towards the end, where he lofted a free into the box rather than he himself, the biggest man on the pitch, probably being in there if he was going to go for goal, or if he just stuck it over the bar. That also would have been helpful to them. So yeah, not a good weekend for those teams.
To head out to Connacht. I mean, look, they were banging on about how they were so great for so long. This one weekend, everybody else is going to enjoy it. But obviously, 3 of the teams aren't dead yet. And in fairness, I think Sligo are relatively happy with the experience they've had of playing at this level. And they were talking in the aftermath about how it's going to improve them and bring them on next year. So Division 3 is going to be fairly sensational next year because the Meath Renaissance is underway. And we're awaiting the draw for the semi-finals. We could yet have the Andy McEntee Derby in the Tailteann Cup. We'll talk more about this a little bit later on. The draw is going to be made at 8:30 this morning. We'll bring it to you as soon as we get it.
Yeah, we will have Cathal in at that time as well, talking about the golf, so there'll be lots of fun things. In the amber, we have none other than Rory McIlroy. So, as we said earlier, the wait for that elusive 5th major continues. Closing round of 70 for him. He lost to Wyndham Clark, so he was only a first-time winner on the PGA Tour in May. He won at Wells Fargo. But yeah, McIlroy's 9 under total was just a shot shy to force a playoff there, and his wait continues. I think there was a surprising amount of Irish people actually stayed up last night to watch it. I know even when chatting to guests to come on today, a lot of people were like, no, sorry, staying up to watch McIlroy. There really was a feeling that he could do something this weekend, and I think that's why so many people jumped on. And as we said, obviously Leona Maguire won as well, so that was, and it could have been a great day for Irish golf and really put itself properly on the map for this season. But wasn't to be. He was talking afterwards and he said he would take another 100 Sundays like today if it meant that he was still in contention for those big titles and he still had a chance to win another Masters or another major. So yeah, it was a tough day for him, but he seemed fairly content with it. He didn't seem absolutely devastated afterwards, and I salute any person who is listening to us right now and also stayed up to watch it, unless you're doing a complete rollover, which I also would salute.
Yeah, poor Cathal, half an hour sleep he's working on here.
I can't wait to see.
We're going to see.
He's surprisingly awake.
It's Cathal, he's flawless.
Yeah.
The man's flawless. But come here, 16 pars in his last round. And the number of top 10 finishes, even top 5 finishes he's had, he's doing absolutely everything right. Like he said, golf is one of those sports, you can have a Wyndham Clark who rocks up and just has the weekend of his life, and it happens to coincide one of the biggest tournaments of the year. That happens. You see, Todd Hamilton did it 20 years ago at the Open, never to be heard from again. You're able to show up and perform when it matters most. But our own John Duggan pointed this out last night, which I thought was very interesting, or actually 4 hours ago. That's how late people were staying up. Jack Nicklaus had a record of 19 runner-up finishes. Just because it's nearly a decade without McIlroy, he's very young in the game of golf. He's definitely going to add to his majors. Like, there's no doubt about it.
Well, I did have doubt about it. I thought that he wasn't going to be able to get back to this level, and I felt like there was going to be a hangover from the whole live thing, and there isn't. It turns out he is actually channeling that and playing better golf as a result this week. He just needs to have some putts drop. I did feel like there was a point where he wasn't going to be able to keep coming back, but it turns out he can, and that's why it's fascinating. Like, he's in the Mayo stage of his career at this point, and we just want him to get over the line. When I do finally win this next major, it's going to be really, really sweet. I'd go through 100 Sundays like this to get my hands on another major championship. So look, we got to move on. That is the amber. He's only an amber because he didn't win, but I think the fact that he was able to be as relevant as he was all week this week and play slightly differently from the normal swashbuckling Rory McIlroy would suggest that there's a maturity in his game and he's going to be okay. And see what happens.
It's interesting how he seems kind of okay with it, but I just, from reading what people were saying, you know, our own Joe Malloy and stuff, it almost felt like those people felt more pain for him that he hadn't quite made it. Like, there's a lot of people, maybe it was just the lack of sleep as well.
Up Mayo, wherever you go, says on YouTube, sorry lads, Rory is Kendall.
Rory might be Kendall.
Why is that? Who's Logan?
Tiger. So am I right in saying
who's Connor?
Rory Liverpool, where he won there before, so am I right in saying 2023? Anyway, we'll come back to that we'll do proper golf with
the man who stayed up to watch it.
Call it a little bit later.
Yeah, so coming up in the green, we have another golfer in Leona Maguire. So she has come second in the Meyer LPGA Classic the last 2 years, but finally, third time lucky. She carded at 8 under par, 64 to win. She started yesterday 2 holes off the lead, and then 4 birdies and an eagle in her final 6 holes gave her her second success on the tour. So she birdied the 13th, 16th, 17th and 18th, and then the eagle came on the 14th. I mean, it's great to see for her that she finally is kind of catching up and getting a few more of those tour wins that we've said that we've always known she can get, and hopefully she can just keep building on it. She said herself that she's been playing some really good golf leading into this week, and she just was trying to be patient with herself and not put too much pressure. Also, that it was nice to go bogey free, and that her goal was to get 20 under, so she said it was nice to get one better than that. And yeah, she just said it was a tough weekend, that she didn't feel like it was free-flowing golf for her, which from the outside you would say it looked pretty free-flowing, but clearly she was feeling the pressure a little bit. But yeah, she managed to come out on top. I
haven't seen the updated rankings just yet, but she was 20th in the world heading into the tournament, and I suspect she'll be up a few places as well. I think the most important part about this is that her form has kind of, like most golfers, ebbed and flowed a bit, but it's always come back, and she's a genuine superstar of the game, and 350 grand for winning this, like, it's not chump change, but it's like just an expectation now that she's going to be competing at the very top level. So congratulations to her. She's a cold, hard assassin when it comes down the back nine. She is a killer. This is exactly what we need in Irish sports. Way more Leona Maguires. I think, like,
she's like Logan, so
you're gonna find a lot of Irish sports teams beating a path to the door, going, so how does this work? Why do you always play your best when it's most difficult?
I was going to say, can we get a consultancy set up for her, and then she can her and maybe like David Sharkey or something, they could team up and do some theming and also some how to be a cold hard killer in the final moments of a game.
Speaking of cold hard killers, Kevin Feely, I'm delighted for the man. Like, to do his Achilles the way he did was horrific. In your 30s you do your Achilles, most people don't come back from it. He came back in a record breaking time and then was thrust into being required way ahead of it, and then I don't know if you saw it, but afterwards he was just sitting there still panting and sweating in the studio afterwards, going and they were asking him, you left-footed or right-footed, and he's like, oh no, I'm right-footed, but he's kicking all the points with the left foot in the last second, like literally the last play of the game, to still have the energy despite the fact that you're new Achilles. I mean, look, it's actually the most important score that Kildare have had since McGeaney era, right? That's the first thing, and it's definitely the score of the year so far, and I'm not hearing any arguments. So.
I have to agree, to be honest. Like, it was an incredible take. And actually, there was one stage in the La Rochelle match where there was a similar moment of like an absolutely brilliant take, and it was so reminiscent of that one. And I think for we've listened to Shane talk about Roscommon so much over the last
screw you, Shane.
couple of weeks, and
Where's your messiah now, Flanders?
The fact that Davy Burke is a messiah of football and he's going to take over the world. And I mean, I think he has a point in the fact Davy Burke has obviously done an incredible job at Roscommon, but it felt like Kildare just had their number. And not only that, they had those moments of pure class to see it out. And it's a bit like we were saying about Leona Maguire. It's rare that you've seen those moments of class from this Kildare side in recent times, I think is probably fair to say. So yeah, it was a good win for them, and also very enjoyable to watch. I do enjoy seeing Roscommon getting beaten, I won't lie.
It was an incredible end to the group stages. Let's have a proper, honest reconciliation with how everybody feels about the group stages now. Before you go, it's only one. It's like everything was building up. The whole point of the elaborate structure was to create yesterday's scenarios where every single score mattered, and Kieran McGeeney afterwards was effusive in his praise. It was like literally every point at the end of those games mattered, and
we actually have a clip of him talking about that as well if you want to listen to it.
So it's very hard to know what's going to keep people on TV happy. I know what keeps the supporters happy. More games, more competitive games. Nearly every game this year in the round robin system has been competitive. A couple of years ago we were crying we don't have enough games. Now we're saying we're too too many games. Then there was dead rubbers, and now there's no dead rubbers. To me, you have to sit back and sort of see. Like some of the games today, everybody was fighting for every score. It wasn't even winning the game; it was fighting for every single score. And to me, the system, is much better.
Yeah, way better. And you were making the point about the Mayo free at the end. A point there would have meant everybody ends up on 4 points of scoring difference, and all of a sudden this is hugely important, and that's a transformative moment for maybe not for Kerry, because it looks like Kerry are back in form, but perhaps for Mayo. So Mayo could be heading out in a whimper next week, and I don't know. I thought it was all excellent.
Well, if you were to pick who was going to end up in the quarterfinals at the end of this series, and you said Kerry, Derry, Dublin, you'd be like, yeah, fair enough. And if you threw Armagh into the middle of it, everyone would have been like, what happened with that? And it's not the fact that Armagh have had great success the last couple of years. It was just more that the way it was set up, it felt like everyone thought it was completely obvious what was going to happen and how this was going to go, because everyone was like, oh well, it's not competitive, or there's nothing on the line. But then you get a day like yesterday, and it was like, I wish I had 50 eyes and 50 TV screens so that you could actually watch every single game, because all of them, pretty much apart from say maybe ones like Dublin and Sligo, were quite interesting and pulled off some sort of interesting result, even if it was Kerry absolutely hammering Louth in the way they did.
Cork, what the hell? Cork 6 points down, and all of a sudden, what? You're supposed to roll over. That's what we've seen. They've been flaky, but they really weren't. That was sensational. And then for Westmeath, with nothing to play for, to stop Tyrone the way they did. Desi Dolan was very angry afterwards with the way his team had been written off and accused of not being worthy of their place. But Division 3 next year is going to be absolutely on fire. I don't know. I thought that yesterday was an awakening of the Gaelic Football Championship, and let's wait and see what happens. And then maybe we can stop with this is all terrible. The game's dead.
There's also the thing of people saying, well, if it's Kerry and Dublin in the final, what does all this matter? And you're like, well, no, you want a good championship. It doesn't matter if a team goes out in the quarterfinals but they've gone on some amazing run throughout the rest. That's part of the fun. In
the power rankings this week, there's going to be many changes. I think McGeeney was referencing the power rankings and the difference between Galway and Armagh. Galway at the top of the first page, Armagh at the bottom, barely a point between them after extra time. Last year they lost on penalties. Anyway, Tommy Rooney has a lot to answer for. Have we another green, or is that it?
Nope, that's us.
All right, that's this week's Gillette Labs Performance Rankings.
OTB AM's Performance Rankings with Gillette.
After the break, John Fallon on tonight's game and Stephen Kenny's future.
To be honest, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. I just really focused on developing the team and preparing the team for tomorrow. So there's a lot of criticism, and some of it justified, and I have to accept that. And likewise, some of it inaccurate. That's the nature of it. And I think, from my point of view, I'm not fixated with it. I'm just fairly focused on what we have to do, and and just focused on the task at hand, which is managing this group of players. We're not perfect, but I really believe in the players. I believe in the players. I know people have other viewpoints. I believe in the players. I think it's not perfect. A lot of them are not playing at their clubs. That's been really tough for them. A lot of players, some of our better players, are not playing at their clubs, and that's been difficult. But that's not an excuse. We wanted to win against Greece. We didn't win. But that is the reality. And other players that should be in the team, but they haven't been playing for so long, and they're amongst our most talented. There's a sense of frustration, but that's the reality. It's very hard to come out and not be playing for months and months and come out and play at international level, particularly a game of the intensity the other night. But that's the reality. But I believe in the players that we've got. I think we've got a really talented group coming through. I think they were disappointed the other night. If we'd have won the other night against Greece, everything would have been on track. We're going into the Gibraltar game, everything great. Now, because we didn't, it's a catastrophe. And I do get that. But we've just got to focus on tomorrow and Gibraltar, make sure they're ready. I know the games are tight previously, and I think so we just got to get ourselves ready and make sure we get a home victory.
OTB AM,
the Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball.
Toe pocket goal!
Ahead of this summer's football in Australia.
We're going to Australia.
It's what dreams are made of.
We'll be hosting a night of celebration for the Republic of Ireland women's national team in partnership with Sky, and it's coming your way on June 28th in the Mansion House in Dublin.
What a moment for the Republic of Ireland.
We'll be joined by the full squad.
I don't know what we've just done. I did believe we could do it.
As well as some other great guests as we give the team a night to remember.
Emma Byrne is in tears.
I can't believe it. We've finally done it.
Tune into all of Off the Ball's channels for a chance to win tickets to this exclusive event.
Sky, proud primary partners of the Republic of Ireland women's national team.
Out believe together, and we can go anywhere.
They are going to the World Cup Finals.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
It's 12 minutes past 8. You're watching OTB AM this Monday morning. If you want to get in touch with us, you can leave a comment on our YouTube stream, youtube.com/offtheball. You can tweet us at offtheball.am, or of course you can always get us the old fashioned way, text or WhatsApp 0879 180 180 is the number. John Fallon of the Irish Examiner is with us to reflect on a crushing defeat for the Republic of Ireland in Athens and to look ahead to what's going to happen tonight. John, before we get to the football, from a contractual perspective and from a board perspective, what happens now over the next period of time?
Well, I don't think anything immediate is going to happen unless there's a humiliation tonight in the form of not beating Gibraltar, ranked 201 in the world. But what you do have coming up is a routine board meeting. I think it's Tuesday week, and I'm sure as part of that schedule, there'll be a review of the international affairs, all the teams, 21s, women's and so forth, and you can expect that the senior team's performance will arise at that stage. Now, how far that goes, as I said, will probably depend on tonight's outcome, but what you can be sure of is it'll certainly garner discussion arising from Friday night's events in Athens. So that's sort of the next step in terms of the contract. It runs all the way up to the end of this campaign, which could go as far as March next year. In the likely event, it seems, although it is marginal, that we're in the Euro playoff series, which is 2 games. So that's the contract that's there. Stephen mentioned it yesterday, but we should also remember that there is a provision in there that a termination can take place, which doesn't require the FAI to pay out the full salary that will be remaining on the contract. So they're the variables that are involved. So maybe we'll know a bit more this time tomorrow when this game is out of the way tonight.
In terms of a potential succession plan, right? Obviously, every well-run organisation in the world has succession plans in place for all of their major roles. Who would actually be making the list of potential successors? Whose job within the FAI is it to plot a course for the future?
Yeah, I think it's sort of one man now. It's a chap called Mark Canham, who was brought in last year as the head of football, which was the previous incarnation held by Real Doctor, and he wasn't really there when this contract was organised previously, and he sort of sits at the apex of the FAI football structure. So Stephen and Vera Powell on the women's side would be answerable ultimately to Mark. So if the board or Jonathan Hill is looking for guidance, it is he that he will turn to. He's got extensive experience from the English FA and also the English Premier League. So in this instance, it being a football decision, I think the responsibility would lie with him to scour the market and maybe sound out people or potential candidates and to come up with a list and take it from there.
I think a lot of Irish football fans probably don't know that much about him.
Yeah, that's right. He was quite a low-key name when that recruitment process was on. There was other names linked with that job, sort of former internationals and so on. So Mark has been in the job, I think, just over a year. Hasn't done any formal media work, but has been working behind the scenes. Obviously, with the facilities program that went on, or the facility strategy that was on, he would have been involved in that. He's been around the country then doing these pathway road shows, and he's been dealing with people. But I think for now he's certainly happy to work behind the scenes, but depending on how things go here, there's probably going to be a big spotlight on him. This is one that he will his expertise will be required, and also his contact book, if we're going to sort of spread the net and look for the right candidate.
It's kind of a two-part question, but is there much of an indication in terms of what his relationship is like with Stephen Kenny going into, say, a situation where maybe there needs to be a conversation of what the future looks like, and then also, should that happen in terms of his contact book, where he might be looking, like if he has had an experience with the FA, is most of his contacts based in England or English managers?
Yeah, on the first part, his relationship with Stephen Kenny, we don't know. I don't think Stephen has really mentioned him, but I do know he was part of the delegation in Greece there last week. I saw him on the sideline when they were training on Thursday night. Secondly, yeah, his background is primarily in England. He was a player, and then he moved into the football education side of things. He would have been sort of the Premier League link man between all the clubs in terms of the structures and the standards that they would have had to meet. So he would have been dealing with all those and the various people that have come and gone. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have an interest in further beyond the UK, which you probably see as a trend across Europe. Associations do go for people outside of sort of the goldfish bowl, so you wouldn't restrict it just to that, but there are certain people that he would be aware when you look at that background that he would have come across who may have some Irish links.
It has got to the stage where we're starting to realistically consider contingency plans, because it's difficult to see any way back from this point for Stephen Kenny, barring a remarkable run of results which would be the equal of any series of results that we've ever had in Irish football history. Like, that's the scale of the task facing Kenny, to salvage something from this campaign, really.
Yeah, he spoke yesterday about exceptional results, and I know Matt Doherty spoke to Nathan and ourselves the other night in the same context, that we are capable of doing this, but we're really coming from a low base, 0 points from 6 after 2 games in a campaign realistically, which is only about 6 games, because, if you assume everyone's going to beat Gibraltar, it's between the other sort of 4 nations. So we have to really we'd have to beat Greece at home. Obviously, we'd have to beat Holland at least once. If what Stephen envisions, which is France running away with the group, leaving it between the other three to fight it out for one place, and recent history just shows we don't do that. We haven't had a big results probably since the 2018 campaign. When we went away and beat Austria and Wales, it's a long time ago. And the question arises: is what we've seen, in the recent past, enough to give you confidence that can happen in its current guise? So, I would concur with what you're saying. I think I don't think it's going to happen, and that will probably frame some of the conversations that the FA are going to have internally in the coming months.
So, realistically, right? Let's assume we win tonight, and then we have okay performances. You would expect us to have backs to the wall performances in Paris and the Dutch, and maybe we get a point out of those two games. If it's not a disaster, or maybe we sneak a famous victory. What would need to happen for Stephen Kenny to get the opportunity, if we even do manage to get a playoff? Or do you feel like they'd give him a playoff rather than change in advance?
Yeah, there's a few parts to that. We've got to set out the context here. Like, Stephen was given this contract extension after the last World Cup campaign, which I think was in November 21, and it was on the basis of tolerating some of the mishaps that had gone on before, in the context of having a team that was going to be ready to compete, seriously compete, to qualify for Euro 2024. So far, so that just hasn't happened, and the likelihood is we're going to be relying on that playoff, which we're not even guaranteed to be in. You'd need your mathematicians here at the moment, and I know Nathan's a bit of a guru on that front to find out exactly what the prospects are. But we could end up getting to November and having no playoff, which is basically means there would be nothing there in 2024. So, the body of evidence, or the dilemma facing the FEI, is that they just continue on as they are, which in some people's eyes would be the definition of insanity. Or do they look at alternatives and say, well, if we are going to have a change, we'll at least give that person those games between September and November and the playoff to build for the next campaign. So that's really where it's at. And that's what it's going to come down to. As you say, I think tonight is going to be a formality. Gibraltar just lose games 3-0. But I don't think that's going to make too much of a difference. It's as I said, wrote this morning, and most people have, it's really a no-win game, for Stephen. The damage really was the major part that was done on Friday night. So I think once the dust settles this week, I would expect some deep thoughts and conversations to happen in the coming weeks.
So you think actually it could be as imminent as that there could be a decision made in advance of the double-header against the Dutch and the French? Possibly.
Yeah, I think possibly, and you sort of started out with contingencies. If they have particular targets in mind, are they going to become available? If they don't go and get them now, are they going to commit elsewhere, or does it leave them vulnerable to losing that person to another opportunity? So I think that will come into the equation as well. So, you probably saw the comments, like Stephen said, he fully expected and will definitely expect to be see out this campaign. And then when he was pushed a bit more later on in the embargoed section, he said that he didn't say it was a certainty. So I've yet to see really or hear of anything that gives him the entitlement to feel that that's going to be the case. As we know in football, particularly management, it's very precarious, and I think already, 2 games into this campaign, a quarter of the campaign, we're in that phase.
And in terms of the decision makers around that, obviously it'll be a collective board decision, but somebody somewhere has to feel like they're confident enough that they have a replacement plan in place that's better than what's there already. And is that back to the head of football and the chief executive, and are they the ones who ultimately make that, or is it more the board members who will decide? Where does that power rest in your view?
Yeah, this is sort of a peculiar one. Historically, in the John Delaney area, it would have always been the board mentioned as that, but we've a different construct to the board now. Like we have independent directors in there who weren't, they weren't enlisted for the football expertise. And I know some of them have stated publicly that they don't really have much knowledge of football. So that would be ludicrous, I think, to put that in the hands of it's a 12-person board, but currently there's only 10 there, that they can sit around the table and, come up with their idea of football and who should be manager and who shouldn't be manager. So my anticipation is that they will leave it to the more qualified people who would be the head of football and the chief executive to come up with a report and recommendation, both in terms of the current manager position and what the plan B is. And if they feel that that's viable, I think they would endorse that decision. So I don't think this is a decision that would be taken by the traditional board. I think they will be guided by those football people, which is the way it should be, realistically. Now, you may have a situation from the board whereby there's a subcommittee formed, and now that happened the last time when the succession plan was executed. There was two board members and Gary Owens, the chief executive. So you may have that situation, depending on those people. Like looking at the composition of the board, you basically have 5 from the football side, 5 from the independents. One of which on the independents is Packy Bonner. So again, he may be someone that has a contribution to make on this, given his experience and the fact that he's sort of highly involved with UEFA.
Obviously, there's been a lot of focus on Stephen Kenny since Friday, because at the end of the day, the buck does tend to stop with the manager, and it's easier to get rid of a manager than it is an entire squad. But they're also at fault massively for what happened on Friday. And when we're looking at succession plans, the one thing that keeps coming up is the fact that this isn't one of the greatest crop of players that we've ever had, and that's not something you solve overnight. That requires investment from very much grassroots levels all the way up. When the FAI are looking for someone, if they do get rid of Kenny, sure, you would think it would probably need to be someone who can support that and understands, I suppose, the systems if we're actually to get ourselves out of this situation. But what is the likelihood of that happening? If I know I've seen a lot of different names mentioned, some former Ireland players, and then there's other ones which are English managers coming in, but it feels like to me that we look at, say, what Vera Pauw did when she came in with the team, and one of the things that she's always said is that she had enough people around her to kind of keep that side of the grassroots side of things going and building. What's the likelihood that Stephen Kenny's successor is going to be able to know the league and I suppose develop the talent and maybe the way we need?
Yeah, it's a good point, and I think that would be part of it, and that's why I doubt, again, we're being hypothetical about this. Stephen's in the job until we hear otherwise. But the person that comes in will, I think, have to have a working knowledge of the climate here, and importantly, surround himself with the right people. So again, you could go through some of the candidates, and you could probably look at certain favourites there. So I would expect that will be the case. But first and foremost, like any management, whether it's club or international, the question asked is the manager getting enough out of the players, and that's the first requisite that the board or the executive too that we mentioned will sort of hone in on. They will look for a manager who can get more out of the players, who can set them up in a way that sort of deals with what they had on Friday quite early in the game, and can execute some in-game management as well, so it's not beyond us quite early in the match. So I think they would be the first variables to be involved. But beyond that, I would think, for example, the number 2 and possibly the number 3 would be people, maybe ex-internationals, if the manager isn't himself a former international. So I think that's a given.
So Lee Carsley is who you have had top of your wish list in the Irish Examiner this morning. Do we think Carsley would be interested at this stage? Is there enough indication that might be a possibility to make it realistic, do you think?
In conclusion, yes, I think there is. The timing of it is probably ideal. He has a stated ambition of managing Ireland. He played for Ireland. He won 40 caps. He's involved in the Euros in England for the next couple of weeks. He doesn't have any commitment beyond that. I know the English FA are very eager to keep him. But I think if you were to, from the FEI side, to have a conversation with Lee Carsey about the joint vision, I think he would very much buy into that and could feel he could contribute to that. He does have a history of working with young players, certainly so at Manchester City. So given the profile of the team, and particularly the way it's going to be in the next sort of 12 to 18 months with that group of sort of early 30 lads moving on a bit as well, I think he would grasp this opportunity to see what he can bring to it. He is a name that's very popular in England. So I know there's clubs that are interested in him and want to take him. But he does have a deep affinity with Ireland. I know that, and I would think that he probably should be the man that would have first refusal on this.
Did the return of Big Sam to the Leeds gig with the Robbie Keane addendum suddenly catapult him up the list? I know you're laughing at this, but he hasn't gone away, you know.
Was he ever in it? I don't think I'd ever really heard Big Sam's name mentioned apart from yourselves until the weekend. Someone threw him in yesterday. Big Sam won't be the Ireland manager. Not a hope.
Not even with Robbie in tow, no?
No.
Are you promising me this, John?
Yes. Yeah, you can see tonight. Don't worry, he won't be, for a number of reasons which we probably don't have time to go into, but that is not the type of fit that the FEI, the modern FEI, the 2023 FEI will be plumping for. There's more appropriate and suitable candidates than that. So rest assured, that won't be happening.
So they do want somebody who will bring an experience of the architecture of football, and that's pardon me, that's a flabby way of putting it, but like somebody who isn't just going to come in and do that job in isolation, because we've tried that before and hasn't really worked. Like if it's not, so Big Sam is kind of, I suppose, the ultimate example, but in a way Martin O'Neill and Trapp were fairly similar in that they weren't involved or emotionally invested in having a connection between the senior team and anything that went underneath it. Is the hope that the FAI will continue with the strategy of trying to link our senior team with the other teams that we have at international level? And whether or not it's working at the moment, obviously it isn't, but that in the medium term, if we are going to succeed as a football country, we do actually need some different thinking.
Yeah, is the answer to that. And they're not going to just employ someone whose undivided attention is purely to the senior team, and some of the candidates that are there, they would be of that mind. They would deal in the overall broader scheme of things. So I wouldn't have fears. Obviously, they know what their job is to get results for the senior team. We have to qualify for tournaments. Like the FEI strategy clearly states, the expectation is to qualify for every second tournament. We are unlikely to qualify for a tournament for a decade now if this one goes. And given the FEI's financial position, that's just that's just unviable. That just cannot continue given the prize money that's involved and the cash flow injection they make. So reverting back to your point, I wouldn't have a fear of that. Names such as Graham Potter have been mentioned. Personally, I don't think we would particularly appeal to him, but you're dealing with that sort of profile. You're dealing with a modern manager, and if there was to be a handover, I don't see, I wouldn't fear that some of the good work that Stephen has done in terms of introducing a progressive style of football would be lost. I think there would be, sort of a template there. But he doesn't have a copyright on it, as Damien Delaney said. There are other managers who think that way and play that way. And also, as we saw on Friday, it's not necessarily that's not a constant in the team either. We did go direct, and as Gus Poya found afterwards, it wasn't quite the beautiful game that he might have anticipated.
John, we'll leave it there. Good stuff. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Thank you.
It's John Fallon, the Irish Examiner, giving us some thoughts on the situation this morning. It's 8:33. OTB AM is live with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. Some of your comments. Big name manager wouldn't help the current players as they just aren't good enough. So you get a foreign version of Kenny. Is this going to improve anything? Says Powell 74. If the worst happened and we didn't beat Gibraltar, population of Leitrim tonight, do we think Kenny would resign? I don't know. I try not to think about Ireland not beating Gibraltar. I mean, come on. Life is short and miserable enough for that. It's like, what's the absolute worst that could happen? I find it hard to turn on Kenny. He comes across so well in the media and always backs his players, which is a great trait to have, says David Rowan. No point bringing people through when you're never competitive in a group, says Mike Don. What's more likely to happen first? Mayo wins Sam, Rory wins another major, or Ireland win a Rugby World Cup quarter final? That's Powell 74. The holy
what
Trinity.
A lineup. Just give up now.
God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. Where's St. Patrick when you need him? Okay, front page headlines this morning on two of our tabloids. I'm just going to find them so I get the right ones. The same headline. We'll Liam it there so on the front of the Star, and we'll Liam it there so on the front of the Irish Sun, because the news is broken this morning that Liam Brady is stepping down as a pundit for RTE on television. To reflect a little bit on this, Colin Buig is back.
We just missed him so much over the last 2 weeks, so we dragged him back.
What a man. I don't know if people saw that documentary a few weeks ago now at this stage on RT about Liam Brady's career, because I've always read about it and heard about it, how amazing it is on paper, but then actually to see it in action in a documentary as he goes back to Italy and goes to his old haunts, like 2 years at Juventus, 2 years at Sampdoria, 2 years at Inter, and then a year at Ascoli, which is the only part of the documentary they don't actually cover, that final season, but 7 years in Italy. Like, it's one of the great Irish sporting careers, never mind football. And the fact that he flourished so much too, was a big move going from Arsenal to Juventus. As I say, only 2 seasons there, but that winning penalty then in pretty much his final kick at the ball for Juve, I think, to win Serie A. What a career. And then to see the guy speak fluent Italian is amazing. It's just amazing. The way, back then of course there was no help, like there was no adaptation team or anything like that to help you settle into a new culture and language. He just got stuck in, and he had to, because no one was going to talk to him if he couldn't speak Italian, and he went for it. And then just to be such a beautiful player too, like, and like we're a country of like football lovers who have not produced many great footballers, but he's one of them.
I haven't seen the documentary, but mates of mine were telling me about it recently, that there's an incredible scene with Tardelli where they arrive down into this kind of tiny little village, and they're fluently chatting away to each other, and then they go to Tardelli's gaff, which is basically like Madsen's in Succession.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. And like, he doesn't miss a beat, Brady. You know, he's perfectly fluent with his old colleague. And because I grew up with him, you know, obviously on the RT panel, and the great panel that they had, and I just, you know, thought he was the kind of curmudgeon, you know, ex-pro who was very hard to please and kind of like had a, I suppose, negative tone about him often, but you would listen to his opinion. Like, he definitely was very kind of articulate and expressive in terms of like what he expected from players and games in general. But there's this whole other side to him, and also you do see that kind of more flamboyant nature to him. And also that documentary starts with him singing, I think it's a bit of Bob Dylan, and I never knew he was this great music lover. So look, the documentary just kind of reminded me, and I suppose showcased to me for the first time, just how much of a legend this guy is outside of what I had already heard. But to lose him on the panel, yeah, it is properly now finally the end of that great era.
For my 10th birthday, I got to go to watch Ireland versus Brazil when Brady scored, and I've been a massive fan of Liam Brady ever since. I like a lot of people think he's just a grumpy bollocks, but actually he just loves football at a level where he's not willing to tolerate nonsense. That's you know, there's nothing wrong with being a bit grumpy if things aren't going well.
Exactly. And then and like this film shows the other side of him.
It turns out he's not a grumpy bollocks.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
I always thought as well, out of that that group of panelists, he was not the most grumpy out of them all. I would have said grumpy. He was like, yeah.
No, I think he's gotten. I suppose he's played that role since the rest of the lads left. You know, one by one, inevitably, because he's the most senior. So
Yeah.
With all these young people coming in.
The senior analyst role passed from Gilesy to Brady, and very few people in the world would have been able to take on that mantle. We are delighted to be able to announce this morning that we're going to be hosting a very special event in the Mansion House in October with Liam Brady, partly in celebration of the fact that his book is coming out. I think we have an exclusive first look at the cover of his new autobiography. That's it there. Liam Brady, Born to be a Footballer. It is available for pre-order now in all good bookstores. We'll send out a link where you're going to be able to get that, and make sure you stay tuned to all our social channels, because we will be having, as I said, a massive night of celebration of Liam Brady's career to launch the book in October, and we're really looking forward to that. It's going to be a big night, and hopefully there'll be some very special guests along the way to pay tribute to one of the true great Irish football lives. When you think about what we're missing, a Brady or a Giles in midfield, the difference that it would make to our team right now.
One of the first Arsenal legends to come into my general view of life. I always remember it, like him and Fabregas, which was like a weird combination, because obviously two people who were at the club at different times. But yeah, he always was like, it dumbfounded me that someone from Ireland had played for Arsenal at that stage. And then I started to learn about like Emma Byrne, Keir Grant, all these like great players, and I was like, wow, we actually have a great history here. I've chosen well.
Yeah, it was a good selection to make, especially now that they're back not bad again. So JP Wright, voice actor, says, if Kildare draw Monaghan and win, Shane should be banned from ever mentioning Monaghan for the rest of the year. I think we can all agree for that. I think like if that was to happen, I mean, it would be quite the win for Kildare at this stage, but we would take it. So Meath and Antrim have been drawn against each other in the Tailteann Cup semi-finals.
Meath and Antrim down in Laois.
Right.
Just looking at it here.
Andy McAtee slightly uncomfortable with that, but big game. Tailteann Cup is paying its dues, and those games are going to be in Croker. They're the semi-finals in the Tailteann Cup, so it's Down versus Laois and Meath versus Antrim Tailteann Cup semi-finals. Is it a double header? I don't know the specifics of that. I expect it would be. Cathal Mullaney is with us. Cathal, good morning to you.
Hiya lads, and Kathleen and Ger, how's it going?
Slightly bleary-eyed, Cathal?
Yeah, I got about half an hour's sleep last night. I stayed up for McIlroy, and it didn't quite work out.
I woke up at 4, checked the phone, was like, and then kind of had a fever hour extra sleep, and then I don't know, I haven't seen any of it, but it just feels like he never quite got within touching distance to put pressure on.
Yeah, I felt there was a sense that around the turn that if McIlroy could maybe play in level power from there, that he would really apply the pressure on Clark, because Clark did look a little bit nervy, I thought, coming down the stretch, and he did make those couple of bogeys to kind of open the door again for McIlroy. But I think Wyndham Clark deserves an enormous amount of credit for the couple of shots that he hit coming in on 17 and 18 to keep it relatively stress-free, because McIlroy had posted on the number just in front of him on 9 under par. From McIlroy's point of view, I mean, he's probably thinking what more he has to do, because he was close to flawless from tee to green, and it, again, eerily similar to the final day at St Andrews last year at the Open Championship. Putts just wouldn't drop for him, and it wasn't that he was hitting bad putts. The pace of them was quite good. It was finishing 6 to 12 inches behind the hole, and generally speaking he had a lot of opportunities. Now the organisers of the tournament had took the pins away on the final day to try and keep the scoring relatively in line with US Open standards over the years, but I'm sure he's waking up this morning thinking, what do I have to do here to end the drought?
Is he also thinking, though, I'm back, baby?
Well, he said that in his post-round interviews, that he feels like he's getting closer, and that if he keeps putting himself in these positions, that he's going to eventually open the door. But there has to be another side to that, insofar as if you keep getting into these positions and not winning, that has to play on your mind.
Sorry. The draw, there was no hot balls in this draw, or else they've decided that there were many hot balls, and this is exactly what they want. The draw is through for, breaking news here, Kildare versus Monaghan, Cork at home to Roscommon, Donegal at home to Tyrone, and Galway at home to Mayo.
We were literally talking about this outside, me and Cathal, earlier, before we came on the show, about Galway Mayo.
Wow. Wildcard weekend just got wild.
Wow.
Ger Shane Derby as well.
Preliminary quarter-final weekend. These are your facts and figures. I do think they just need to rebrand this. Now, this is exactly what we wanted, right? I mean, I would
Did you say Donegal Tyrone as well?
Donegal Tyrone
so you
and
got two
Ballygofay.
big provincial matches there. Wow. Oh, Galway Mayo is a huge one, because I have to say, going into last weekend and even now, I thought Galway Mayo were the two top teams in the country. And you know, I think, okay, they lost last weekend, but they're still both in reasonably good shape. But that's a huge game. What, in Pearse Stadium? Galway will be at home advantage.
Yep.
I wonder where Kildare will take Monaghan. They should have
They
the
go to Tullamore.
Well, maybe Wexford Park.
That's a good draw for Kildare.
As far away from Monaghan as they possibly can. Is it a good draw? I suppose. Yeah. It's about so Monaghan coming off the back of a tricky couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So maybe Kildare putting in their best performance under Glenn Ryan. They haven't been able to put back-to-back performances together. So, but Cork versus Roscommon. I mean, Cork are going to feel themselves now, right?
Yeah.
Like they've just taken care of business against one of the Connacht powerhouses, and very spiky post-match from Davy to, I don't know, just, you know, naming a few of the bad wides. So
yeah,
big week for Roscommon. Donegal against Tyrone, like Paddy McBrady's back, playing well. Donegal feeling themselves a little bit not scared of Tyrone, I don't think.
Yeah, and they've already beaten another Ulster team in Monaghan, so you know they'll be full of confidence. That's a brilliant draw.
Galway versus
Mayo is a huge one. Like, I mean, God, Mayo will be absolutely kicking themselves.
What were they doing?
Absolutely kicking themselves. But then again, if they were to win next week, they, one, gain momentum, two, they knock out one of the top teams and one of the top contenders for the All-Ireland title.
And one of their arch rivals.
Yeah.
But let's just assume that they had been able to get into the situation where it was Kerry in this draw. Wouldn't life have been much better for them?
Yeah, of course it would. And Killian O'Connor, who played in the club league in Mayo over the weekend, would have another week to get himself back to fitness. But wow, Galway Mayo, you know, Galway at home, you probably would give them the slight edge there. They've got a couple of players back since the league as well. Damien Comer obviously didn't feature, is carrying a knock. He's going to have to try and get back into action as well.
Said it's unlikely he'll be fit for the weekend.
Yeah, but like, I mean, for both teams, I would guess you're trying to rush everyone back, because you're going to need all hands on deck for that game. That's going to generate a huge crowd and a massive interest. And now we are into the real, you know, this is the real championship. And I thought the weekend was actually quite good in that the final round of the group stage did generate quite a bit of quite a few storylines and quite a bit of interest. And Kildare and Roscommon was a really good game yesterday. I think Cork's result over Mayo was probably the result of the weekend. And
I just don't understand why there wasn't like a plan in place for Mayo to be like, you know, if we're in this situation and this is all we're going to get, we need these points, so take your point, don't like go for the goal, try and get that, and we will be in a situation where we're better off than playing Galway.
I do think in that situation for Mayo, the fact that they did cough up that lead, I think your head is probably spinning when you're on the field then at that stage, and it's probably hard to think straight.
Is that not where you need to, like, it's O'Shea as well, like he's supposed to be one of the leaders of the team, or else someone else comes over and they're like, look, I'll take the ball, gonna put it over the bar. Even if he was going for the goal, he should have been the one in the box. Like,
I think that it's up to the management team to get a message on. Like, we know they've got runners, we know they've got water carriers, we know they're getting delisting selectors from the match day programme to allow them to be mere Ishkas, and I think you have to tell everybody in advance, we're obviously going to try and win this game, because if we do, we're on easy streets, and if we're not winning the game, then we need to make sure that scenario A, B and C happens. And under these circumstances, because just to explain, they finished on Kerry, Cork and Mayo all finished on 4 points in their group, with Louth at the bottom of the table. Kerry have a far superior scoring difference and finished top because it was a three-way tie, and then Cork and Mayo ended up on the same point scoring difference, and then I think it went to points scored. Is that what the next?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
So Cork outscored Mayo by 4 points over the 3 games. Whereas if Aidan O'Shea had kicked the final free, they would have been ahead of them on scoring difference, and so Mayo would have finished second, and Mayo would have had the home quarter final. And now, in fairness, it would have been Mayo versus Roscommon if the draw stayed true. But if they'd won the game, you have to assume then it would have been Kerry versus Roscommon, and that would have been a really brilliant fixture to look forward to in Killarney. Instead, Mayo now have to go to Galway.
Yeah.
They're going to feel alive. They do like to feel alive, those Mayo boys. This week, they're going to feel it.
They do thrive on knockout football. And
they do a lot better.
Yeah, that's going to be a real huge game. And as I say, one of the contenders is going to be gone after that. I saw Dublin and Sligo yesterday. Dublin were pretty poor for the first 20 minutes, I have to say, but once they shifted up the gears, they
kind of got that goal.
They took over. Yeah, and Sligo had a chance at the other end to get a goal themselves. Kerry, how much can you read into their performance yesterday? They scored 5-24.
I think a lot.
You think?
I think Kerry are back.
Right.
I think Kerry have had one blip. Now, in fairness, that was the best team that they played, although do we have to revisit their Cork performance now? And Cork,
well, on the basis that Cork are obviously
pretty good,
a pretty serious team now.
Sorry, James O'Donoghue's Cork, as they should officially be known.
Passes punditry exams.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the most wide open championship we've had in probably 10 or 12 years. I would think maybe all the way back to kind of 2010, 2012 sort of era.
I really think that it's Dublin Kerry, but because of what happened to Galway at the weekend. Now, having said that, right, as you make the case that the Galway Mayo team, whoever comes through that, are going to be battle hardened and feel good about themselves because they've just knocked off one of their main rivals. But in the quarterfinals, then, can Galway play Armagh again in the quarterfinals?
I don't think there's going to be repeat pairings, but I'm open to correction on that. But
there was no repeat pairings for this, but I think they haven't decided yet because they wanted to wait and see. Maybe you're right. And
I'm not sure. We'll have to clarify that. But
the semi-finals, are they seated on the still on the basis of the old provincial? Like, do you know the way?
Yeah, that it was like Ulster versus Leinster or whatever. Yeah, it could well be. But I think the big thing now is the turnaround for teams. Some teams would probably have a 6-day turnaround to their matches next weekend, and we talk about depth and squads and stuff like that. That's why I think that Galway and Mayo, whoever comes through that, will be okay, because they do both have depth and they will have momentum, the winner of that match, going into a quarter-final against whatever opposition.
So they are avoiding so it says, subject in the first instance to avoidance of repeat provincial final pairings and where possible repeat pairings from round 1 group stage.
Say that again.
So, subject in the first instance to avoidance of repeat provincial final pairings and where possible repeat pairings from round 1.
Okay, so they'll do their best.
Yeah.
Which I think probably should be more easily done than not, given that that's the only group where 3 teams could still be alive. Yeah, sorry, we're working this out in the fly, and it's very the old hamster
makes
wheels.
for a great radio.
Right, so the football championship, complete waste of time, far too many games, blah 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 blah. Blah blah blah.
No, I don't think so.
No, come on! Yesterday was one of the greatest days of Gaelic football in history.
Yeah, I think maybe 1 or 2 little tweaks. Maybe
no tweaks.
Top 2. You think the preliminary quarterfinals works okay?
Well, if they sexed it up. Like, if
they need to call it something different as well.
Yeah, this whole notion that it's like not important because it's preliminary is just wrong. These games next weekend are the preliminary quarterfinals. Galway versus Mayo in knockout football in Pearse Stadium in an All-Ireland series. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And it's not the case that some team has been grandfathered through to the next round by virtue of the fact that they're in an easy province. Everybody has had the same pathway to get here, and some teams screwed it up, and that's why they find themselves in difficulty. I think we're starting to see the rush to condemn in Irish life something immediately. If we just waited and gone, okay, well, actually, first and second week, teams are finding out exactly what's going on. Week 3, absolutely sensational. Literally one of the greatest days of Gaelic football in history. Matches all around the country. Individual, like the weight of the ball in people's hands, deciding whether or not how a whole championship season is going to go for multiple counties at the same moment.
Yeah, but I'll put it to you that if it was 2 teams out of the 4 qualifying, Mayo would be out of the championship this morning because of that turnaround against Cork. Tyrone would be out. They finished 3rd, didn't they?
And would you prefer that?
Well, would that...
Are you not looking forward to Galway Mayo next weekend?
No, of course I am. But would that format make the earlier games a little bit more...
But why do you want those early games to be so amazing? Why are they not just like that was the league and this is the championship? And the league has begot the best teams in the championship, and now we have this incredible round of
Well, so you're willing to sacrifice maybe a little bit of intensity in the first 2 rounds of the group stage for an incredible round 3.
Pretty intense yesterday, right? I think we'd all agree that like the end of the Kildare Roscommon game was absolutely sensational.
It's like 4 games that lasted on a free at the last minute.
Amazing. Like we couldn't have orchestrated it better. So I'm willing to have 2 weeks where everybody's like, okay, we need to find out what's going on here. And those 2 weeks were actually pretty good in retrospect. There were some fairly interesting now, retrospectively, important teams doing stuff. Westmeath, for example, Armagh being beaten and coming through, and everybody writing them off. Donegal, I haven't even mentioned Donegal. Jesus, I don't know. I think that the situation, the scenario we find ourselves in here is pretty good.
Yeah, I suspect that they probably will stick with the format. The only thing that I think the crowd's numbers were down in the first couple of rounds. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
They may look at it that way.
Let's see what happens next weekend.
Yeah, I know it's going to be fine next weekend.
Let's see. Carl, good stuff. Thanks a million for that. Right, Nathan Murphy is with us. Nathan, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Not happy with that draw, are you?
I'm regretting having a conversation on Saturday where I was talking about a potential Galway Mayo All-Ireland final, and that maybe that was the way to go and win it, to beat Galway in a final. Things took a dramatic turn yesterday afternoon. Listen, if it's Mayo, it does feel, watching Mayo, that they're similar to the Rochford era, mirroring their opponents, that whatever level their opponent is at, they play at. And if intensity needs to be brought, that they can bring it, but that they're not ready to bring it themselves. And I think they'll need to bring it, and Galway will bring it next Saturday or Sunday in Pearse Stadium. Like, what a game.
Yeah.
What a game.
Yeah. We didn't get you on to talk about that, but your sad little face at the start meant that I had to ask about it.
McIlroy and Mayo.
What about Rory? Wow. Did you stay up? You did.
No, I did not. I've discovered a new way of watching golf. I travelled back overnight from Greece, and I'm an old man now, and I stayed up much the first 4 holes, and my eyes were closing, and I thought, let's go to bed. Got up at 6 a.m. It turns out watching golf with no ad breaks is a vastly more enjoyable experience, because there's a hell of a lot of them.
So what happened?
It didn't hold any putts. Simple as that. That on a very difficult golf course, he hit the ball incredibly well, and he gave himself so many chances, but it just hasn't been there from all week on the greens. He hit 59 greens in regulation across the 4 rounds, and still finished on 9 under par. Couldn't win this tournament. And looking back through my notes, if you look all the way really from the 8th hole, when he had that eagle putt from off the green, leaves it 4 foot short, missed that. He had 6 birdie putts in a row from then on, 5 of them all from very much makeable range, and he didn't hole any of them. And that was the opportunity when Wyndham Clark, who played exceptionally well, but is not a major winner, is not somebody who's ever contended in a major before. That was the opportunity coming into the back 9 to really put some pressure on him. And Clark played some really solid golf around then, but that was Rory's opportunity. He had a big bit of luck on 14 where he went into the side of the bunker, and it could have been an absolute disaster, and he managed to get a free drop, but he ends up bogeying that hole instead of taking advantage of that situation. And then Clark just sort of hung on in there at the end. Again, Rory gave himself a couple of half chances, but like that back 9, it's so hard to pick up shots that when you give yourself the amount of opportunity.
Oh.
The Wi-Fi was busy.
Now, this doesn't feel as heartbreaking as St Andrews, where Rory was absolutely devastated afterwards. Now, bounced back brilliantly at the end of the year, but I think Rory gave it his all and just couldn't get the putts to drop.
We were talking about this earlier on. We put him in the amber because it felt like there was a recovery happening over the last few weeks. It's hard to know exactly where he was. There was the not showing up in the aftermath of the Masters, and then there's the public humiliation of being the only person, himself and Tiger Woods, who stood up on behalf of their tour against Live Golf, and then to find that no one had your back really, and a clandestine deal was being done behind your back. The sacrificial lamb happened, and it did feel like as somebody who takes these things personally, that he might not be able to just come back and be the same golfer. And that's why I think this is kind of a recovery week for him in many respects, is that he will continue to be the golfer that we've always thought he was. Very streaky, but always worth watching and able to contend.
but his streaks last 18 months. Most players have one 18-month streak in their entire career. He's on his 5th 18-month streak where he's one of the best players in the world. And he came into this week talking about playing in Canada at Memorial and feeling his game was in good shape. He had 2 very average Sundays, which I think put a lot of people off. And then, as you say, what felt like something of a public humiliation with how this whole Live PGA Tour merger came about, and the people who he would have been very close to been front and centre at that. But quite often, when his back is against the wall, when there's something to be a little bit angry about, Rory's at his best. And the most positive thing with this, again, is that Rory's contending at majors. For those first 5-6 years since his last major win, there wasn't a huge amount there. There was that Masters where he went into the final round playing with Patrick Reed, and you sort of felt from the second hole it was sort of done. But actually, he's putting himself there major after major and giving himself a chance. So St Andrews, he played too conservatively, sort of felt that would be enough, and it turns out Cam Smith and plays one of the great back nines and outruns him and outlasts him in the end. Yesterday, I felt, watching it there this morning, that he was going to win this by just hanging on in there, that there was no way Wyndham Clark could withhold the pressure and the difficulty of the golf course, and Clark just scrambled ridiculously well. The amount of times he ended up in that really deep rough, ended up in shockingly bad lies, and just about managed to get himself up and down and hold those par putts and stay solid on 10 under par. Like, the top 3 all finished level par for the round. Stayed exactly as they were. Ricky Fowler obviously blew up in the final round, but the other 3 all stayed level par. It was that sort of US Open final day, and McIlroy, the frustration will be he had the chances, and there've been question marks about his putting through the years. He definitely went through a spell in the latter half of last year where his putting had improved massively, but last night, when the heat was really on, those 14, 18 footers, and he had so many in a row that he couldn't hold, that's where it'll be a bitter taste in his mouth. But I think he'll take a lot of confidence, and he's heading to Hoylake in a month, where he won the Open Championship previously, and he'll probably be a hot favourite for that. Like, Scotty Scheffler and John Ram were ahead of him in the betting this week. Scotty Scheffler's putting again. Oh my God! Like, the rest of his game wasn't at its top level yesterday, but his putting again is just absolutely killing him, and it's hard to see how he can turn that around in the space of a month. So I think Rory will head to Hoylake in a very good position mentally on a golf course that he absolutely loves, and with a great chance of winning that 5th major and getting level with Brooks Koepka. And the other thing I think it does is that question that everyone loves to ask: will Rory win another major? And we all let go. You know, we have the extreme reactions of, oh yes, he absolutely will. He might get to 10 still, or he's never going to win another major. Like, you know, he's got another 20 years of these. He's going to put himself in contention another 4 or 5 times. I'm not saying he'll win them all, but he's got so many opportunities still to come. Players will get better, all of that, but he has such a natural talent. He is driving the ball outrageously well. If he had won this week, we'd be talking about one of the great driving performances. His drives on the first hole on all 4 days were just ridiculous. And as much as we talk about the young guys coming through from college that they can all do it, he can still do it better than anybody else off the tee.
All right, Nathan, good stuff. Thanks a million.
Thanks, Ger.
It's Nathan giving some thoughts there. More on Golf Weekly this week. Reminder of the draw: Kildare against Monaghan, Cork against Roscommon, Donegal versus Tyrone, and Galway versus Mayo on wildcard weekend next weekend.
How are you feeling about Monaghan?
I think that Kildare have a chance of winning that game. You'd make Monaghan favourites. They're the Division 1 team, but it's obviously going to be at a neutral venue, and I'd say Monaghan have given Kildare their fill of it in recent years, but at the same time the performance was good. The team selection seemed to be more on point. The strategy behind the play seemed to be more on point from Kildare's perspective. The fact that they came through a game against Roscommon, again a Division 1 side, and the manner in which they were able to do it, like, we've seen that film many times as Kildare fans, where you're in the game, and then the other side creates a few chances and score. And like, it did look like Kildare had made a critical psychological error with 2 minutes of stoppage time with the 5 gone, where a bit of a Hollywood shot gets taken on. Roscommon recycle the ball, go down the field and kick a beautiful, like absolutely sensational equaliser, and Kildare did get the ball back, and you thought maybe they're not going to be able to manufacture a chance, but Daniel Flynn with the outside of the boot to a position where very few people are going to be taking on a free, finds Feely. Feely has an all-time great Kevin Feely catch under pressure, and then, like he's in his back garden, kicks the point, and the game's over. It was sensational. So whatever happens, they've given us a moment. And
I think the means of the win in particular will give them a lot of confidence going into this, knowing that they can pull it out of the bag when they need to, and do it in such spectacular fashion, as you said.
Yeah, look, Vinnie Corey's had a great first season at Monaghan as well. He's been able to pick his horses for courses, but they're coming off the back of a difficult situation where they would have expected to be at home, and they're not. So on verra. 3 minutes past 9 this morning, OTB AM live with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. Alan Quinlan is with us. Quinny, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, guys. How are you?
Roman Ntamack had one of the all-time great rugby moments at the weekend. Unfortunately, it came against Ron Nagara's La Rochelle, but sometimes you just have to hand it to the genius when the genius does genius things.
Yeah, it was sensational, to be honest. I think probably on the face of it, La Rochelle were the better side in the game. And he came up with just a piece of magic there. Ntamack, every time any of the Irish provinces play Toulouse, you're always talking about how do you stop Dupont and Ntamack and their influence in the game. La Rochelle had done that brilliantly for probably 77 minutes of the game on Saturday night, and it's just a little bit of switch off in defence. I think Toulouse didn't seem to be going anywhere, and how often do we see it in rugby when teams are trying to attack out the field, somebody knocks the ball on or drops it. Just keep your discipline, keep the continuity of your defensive line. But I think Dylan Lades was the one who was ultimately missed a tackle, or he slid off Ntamack. But I think Satini, the centre, he shoots up out of the line, and that whole defensive line got fractured, and you just can't do that against someone like Roman Ntamack. And it was a sensational score. He had a poor game, made lots of mistakes throughout the game, poor passes, his kicking wasn't great, and it just shows the quality of the players. It's never over against Toulouse in particular, because it's in their DNA, Ger. There's a lesson for everyone in sport. You know, sometimes when you think it's over and your back is against the wall and you feel it as a fan or a reporter there, they just never stop. They have confidence and belief that they can do something special. You know, they won 22 French top 14 titles, 5 European Cups. They're the most successful club side, and one of the most, if not the most successful club side in professional rugby since its inception. So incredible win in the end. Heartbreak for Ronan and La Rochelle, because they did so, their power and the way they played throughout the game. Of course you can pick holes and mistakes they made, but Ntamack's try was just unbelievable.
For anybody who hasn't seen it yet, sorry, it's ruck deep inside their own half, kind of, and their own 10 metre line, and he just gets the ball, has a shimmy and a feint, and suddenly he's scoring under the post 70 metres down with a minute and a half, 2 minutes on the clock left, and La Rochelle, as you say, in the lead up to that point. Very hard to take for La Rochelle, even with the fact that they're back-to-back European champions. This is the type of thing that kind of scars you a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's obviously, this is the one that they really would have wanted to domestically. You know, both these sides have been the most dominant sides in the league throughout the season. I think there was 10 or 12 points separating the rest. Toulouse and La Rochelle were 10 or 12 points clear of everybody else. Very dominant sides. And, you know, psychologically, you know, look, we're speaking about Leinster losing, you know, the final, how will that affect them, and last year against La Rochelle as well. It's difficult. You have to kind of regroup. New players come in, some guys retire, all that kind of stuff. There's a few changes, so it's hard to take. But look, that's sport. It's pretty cruel. I think what will frustrate La Rochelle is, you know, they nearly did everything right in the game. I think when they're 20-13 up in that second half, that's a critical point. Ramos kicks penalties and puts Toulouse ahead. You know, so La Rochelle just needed another score. There was a couple of key moments there. Brice Toulon running back with the ball at one stage, Bottia at the breakdown gets Intermac right on the halfway line. Intermac, not sure if it's 100%. The referee said he touched the knee off the ground. La Rochelle turned the ball over. The penalty was given against La Rochelle, and then somebody spoke to the referee and they marched him 10 yards. Ramos kicks that penalty. And I suppose the try that they after 23 minutes, Cabreras, the Argentinian centre playing for Toulouse, it's a loose pass. Dante loses the ball in contact and it bobbles a little bit. Toulouse snaffle it and they score in the corner. So they kind of, the two tries they gave were, it wasn't that Toulouse were hammering away at their line and created something wonderful like they usually do, and we know they can. So they did a lot of stuff in the game. But Hugo Mola, the French coach, spoke about karma, and he kind of admitted afterwards that, karma was on their side, a couple of breaks, staying in touch, and that moment of magic at the end. Anton Hostide missed a couple of kicks early on as well. So, yeah, very small margins. They did so much right and just couldn't get over the line, and that's sport. But, Toulouse have that belief and that mentality that they're never finished, and you just can't switch off of them. And that moment of magic, piece of magic from Intermac, who, if you look back at the game, he had a poor game. There's a lot of talk in France, and even some of the match reports afterwards talking about, his inconsistency and how he's played this season. But he still has that ability to do something magical like that. There's even people talking that Jaminet should be out half for France. He offers more control, but when you have someone who can run like that, and again, karma is probably, I just looked back at the match and I thought, sometimes it's not meant to be, and it was a little bit like that for Leinster against La Rochelle in that semi-final. Certain things go wrong, you miss a touch, somebody knocks on the ball. There's one or two moments like that where you're going, God, it's just not happening for us. And that it didn't happen for La Rochelle the other night. And I suppose with Toulouse, if La Rochelle won, Leinster would have been, top seeds in tier 1 of the new format of the Champions Cup. So it's not a big issue, I don't think, but they would have avoided La Rochelle Saracens in the top seeds. But I don't think it'll affect Leinster too much. But it was an incredible final. For anyone that hasn't seen it, the intensity of it, the razzmatazz, the crowd, the atmosphere, it was just unbelievable for middle towards the end of June. See that quality of rugby in France, it's exceptional.
Quinny, good stuff. We'll leave it there. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Cheers, Ger.
Mark McGill says, just back from La Rochelle, great atmosphere down at the Old Port all day. Everyone's sitting out from early, having a few beers, setting off flares inside and outside every time they scored. Fergus Keogh says, delighted to lose exciting rugby, beat La Rochelle's bish bash bosh, give it to Skelton style. I think that's slightly reductive.
Love it, yeah. I mean, it was some game. There was the pattern of it felt very similar to the game against Leinster, in that La Rochelle went down early and fought to get themselves back into it, and then that moment from Netmac at the end was just insane, especially because it was only a couple of minutes before that he had free and he kicked it out on the full, which meant that La Rochelle got a scrum instead, and you could just see in his face he was like, what am I doing? I messed up so many times. And then the other joy, the fact that he was the one that got to kick out the ball at the end, they handed it all the way back to him and he smashed it and just dropped to the ground. You could see how much it meant to them, and the fact that all the La Rochelle players were absolutely devastated. I think there was 4 or 5 tackles that he ran through on way to scoring the try, and every single one of those people, they were all just in absolute tears after the game. I will criticise the French TV director for not giving us enough shots of Rog in the stands and what he was mentally going through. He was
I
barely...
don't understand, this is the best box office there is in the world.
Well, then at one point I was like, maybe did they lose him, because they did show him at one stage and he wasn't actually sitting in the coach's box. He looked like he was sitting on the stairs somewhere, and I was like, maybe they just couldn't find him for a while. But I think they only showed him 2 or 3 times in the whole thing, which is always entertaining.
Schoolboy error on behalf of the French directors, notoriously bad French directors, by the way. 12 minutes past 9 this morning, live commentary of the Republic of Ireland against Gibraltar tonight. Nathan will be joined by Stewie Byrne at the Aviva. Some highlights on the OTB podcast network for you today. Stephen Kennedy's presser, you can hear the first 10 minutes of that. The Sunday paper review, getting deep into the weeds of the Ireland performance, and and all the weekend's GA reaction, brilliant stuff from Tony McEntee, great stuff from the various games around the country, the Tipperary hurlers, etc. Now, over the last few weeks, Off the Ball have been travelling to France in style with Irish ferries and exploring what Nantes, Bordeaux and La Rochelle have to offer ahead of the Rugby World Cup. It's all in partnership with Irish Ferries. See travel differently. Here's a little short clip from the series with Alan Quinlan talking to Aisling about Ireland's game against Romania and Bordeaux as they wander around the city. We're back after these talking Gaelic football with Eamon McGee.
You're listening
to OTB AM. Off the Ball Daily. A home for your favourite podcasts from Off the Ball. The performance rankings, You Had to Be There, the crappy quiz, and a slight tangent.
They're saying it to each other. Yeah. That's what they're saying about us. It's just like one of those things you say in a dressing room. They're all saying we're this. And it's just like, Jesus, are they?
Subscribe to the Off the Ball Daily podcast feed right now.
We still shouldn't be afraid to talk about Ireland potentially winning a World Cup, because
no, you're right.
What we've seen recently is that on their day, when they play well, they can beat anybody. That doesn't mean it's going to happen, but we should talk about that and shouldn't be afraid and say, God, we've got to play this down. There's probably 7 or 8 teams that can potentially win it. And
there's a lot of factors in a World Cup.
Yeah, but taking all that away and not hiding from the fact that Ireland we're all hoping they'll do well. It starts with Romania. You try and build a bit of momentum for the next week, and then you're obviously into South Africa, Scotland, all that kind of stuff, which can define where you go. But you mess up in the first game here against Romania, well, then you have a knock-on
effect for the performances going forward. You want to get
not that a similar situation, Japan, but tiny bit of similarity. Japan were a stronger team, better prepared team, and a very dangerous team at that World Cup. But they beat Ireland, and they really stuttered Ireland's progress and performance. So, Ireland should. There's no guarantees in life or sport, but they should beat Romania here in its first game.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Right, I'm delighted to say Eamon McGee is with us to reflect on an incredible weekend of Gaelic football and a saucy little draw for both the Tailteann Cup semi-finals and the preliminary / wildcard weekend. Eamon, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, Ger. How's the form? How are you?
Yeah, reports of the demise of Gaelic football greatly exaggerated, but particularly reports of the demise of Donegal football, it turns out, greatly exaggerated. What's going on?
Yes, pleasantly surprised there after the performance on Saturday night. Now I thought we wouldn't have enough there to take Monaghan, but put in a big first half, and this showed exactly why we're saying this for a long time, that we'll always produce players now, and if we can get the right structures in place and the right conveyor belt, then it's not going to be once every 20 years or once every 30 years in terms of All Ireland. Like that's the plan, that we want to be up at the top table consistently.
Fair play to Aidan O'Rourke. I know it was a difficult scenario for him to come in, but what they've managed to do to turn things around since the change of manager, it's quite spectacular, really.
It's brilliant, and fair play to them. The credit has to go towards them. Credit has to go towards the players too, because they took it an awful tanking after getting rid of Paddy Carr, and then following up with bad league performances, and then getting beat in the first round by a not great down team. So the players have to take credit, and of course Aidan O'Rourke for galvanising everybody and putting in. They're playing to still a wee bit of work to do in terms of the system, but you can see what they're doing, and it's great to see the likes of Dara Boyle and Oisín Gallen and just taking the opportunity that's come their way.
Now, with the way that the rest of the results went at the weekend, the reward is obviously a home preliminary quarter-final, and it was always going to be Mayo, Tyrone or Roscommon. Of course it had to be Tyrone in the draw this morning. Yeah,
it had to be Tyrone, had to be here for, I'd say that's the 100th time now in the last 10 years we've met Tyrone Balbafane Championship.
And sometimes you come out the right side of it and sometimes you don't. It's not guaranteed here. Like if 2 months ago we had said that Tyrone were going to be playing Donegal and Ballybuffet, you'd been making Tyrone 5-6 point favourites, but not at the moment.
No, and I think that's what there's a lot of younger crew there about Donegal. I think that's exactly what they need. Something, a game like that, just to really take them round, and for them to rise up to the occasion, because they're it's knockout football, and you'd hope to see a response. And I think the Tyrone game is exactly what you'll get from that. That'll take it out of them, and it's really, really exciting, and looking forward to it now.
Why are Tyrone so flaky at the moment?
I don't know. I think there's sports psychologists and a lot more money than us that couldn't answer that question. There must be incredibly second to Armagh, because Armagh are on a different level in terms of frustration, but Tyrone, they're just so inconsistent, and I can't just put my finger on exactly why that is now. I suppose if we all get on the media and get on their back and write them off, that they'll come round and produce a big performance. So my mission this week is just to play up Tyrone and say Tyrone are All Ireland champions, and they're the best team that's left in it. So we've seen that response from them throughout the year, that they've had a bad performance, we've written them off, and then they'll come out and just produce a big one. So there might be an element to there probably is something psychological there. So it's just that if the management team there can sort it out and get her, and hopefully they don't now. Hopefully they'll wait till next year to sort it out.
It is something that kind of inflicts a lot of the teams that are through to this stage or through to the quarterfinal already. You know, you had Nathan saying earlier about Mayo, they need a team that puts them under pressure, although I would argue with him that I think Cork did a pretty good job of that at the weekend. Like Kerry, it's taken them a little bit of time to get going, Dublin taking them time to get going, but they are getting there eventually. Is that just a symptom of the fact that these bigger teams, when they get to the latter end and things really feel like they're on the line, I suppose, for them, that they kind of perk up a little bit?
I think there's definitely something there. We've been brought up for years and years that championship is do or die, and now we're in the championship, and there's kind of exits here. There's ways out. It's not really do or die until like this weekend, so we don't know where teams are at in terms of that mentality that you take the safety rope off, that players make different decisions, managements really, really go for it, they'll risk players, so when they have that weak safety rope on, and then that's gone now, you'll see a completely different mentality for a lot of teams, and it's hard to get a gauge. I think we've all heard this word, shadow boxing, and I'm kind of fed up with it already, so it's hard to get a gauge, and I suppose teams and management are getting used to the new format, that they're trying to find their way through it, but like we are all accustomed to the championship, that you go all in and it's all out, and this is kind of a wee bit of a departure from that, and I'd like to see a wee bit of a more threat, and that's why I'd like to see the two teams maybe. So, but we'll give this format a few years and see how we get on with it.
Yeah, I think yesterday is a ringing endorsement for it. McGeaney was making the point afterwards that like literally every point at the end of games in some groups mattered. Aidan O'Shea kicks that over, and then suddenly they're at home instead of away to Galway, and it's a massive turnaround in their fortunes. Now maybe it turns out a trip to Galway is exactly what they need. We'll have to wait and see, but like even the Kildare Common game, the drama at the end of that, maybe it would have been the same, one of those teams would have been out, but I also think then next week is actually going to be the full bit where we go, that's why the teams in third place are through, because they're all still pretty good, and there's kind of a blanket over that group of teams after you get past Dublin and Kerry. It turns out anywhere from Galway down to Roscommon, any one of those are going to fancy knocking off the other team.
Are you not including Dublin and Kerry in that? I don't think they're that far ahead of the rest of them now.
Slightly ahead. I would make them slightly ahead. I think that their ceiling is way higher than the rest of the teams if they start to click the way we know they can, and it looks like Kerry are getting players into form, and I think Dublin are getting players fit. So that's the bit where I still think
that's fair enough. That's fair enough. And I agree with you. Yesterday was, and Saturday night was a big endorsement now, but we've got to give it time. I still think there's the fact that there's only 4 teams eliminated is a big bugbear, but maybe that's their traditional. Just go back to them. I'm used to the championship where it's all in, and maybe I've got to move on from that, and really get behind this new format and this new way of thinking about the championship.
Can I just take a moment for Kevin Feely, who's come back from a horrific Achilles injury, to have a moment at the end of the game where it's just him and a left foot shot, having won the mark, which was like kind of ridiculous in and of itself. That Kildare performance is actually their best performance really since the McGeaney era. Jason Ryan had a win against Cork, and I think this might be the only other win that we've had against a team in a division higher than us since in Championship. So I don't know. I'm just
I had in my notes there just before, I had Kevin Philly's name marked as a kind of give him a wee nod, because I read an article by Maurice Brosnan there about what he's came through and the way he's battled back, and for him to score, to win the mark and then to score the point is it's just a good personal story, and you got to tip the hat to him.
Yeah, top fella as well. I don't know how far Kildare will go. I don't know if Monaghan will be delighted just getting Kildare in the draw, and they'll be thinking, yeah, that's exactly what we needed. But these games, there does seem like there'll be jeopardy in the 4 games next weekend.
Every team is going in there, and they'll have aspirations of getting to the quarter final. Every team will back themselves in terms of, Kildare going in there against Monaghan. If they look at Monaghan from last Saturday, they'll see the vulnerability. They'll see that we can get at Monaghan here. And Donegal's the same with Tyrone. Obviously Mayo and Galway, that's their 2 teams. And then you have
Cork and Roscommon.
Cork and Roscommon, Cork are just on a high there now, and Roscommon will again have aspirations of progressing further, and kind of backing up the good season they've had. So it's a great way to be going into a weekend like that there.
What do you think happened, Mayo, from the high of going down to Killarney and smashing Kerry the way they did to what's happened in the subsequent 2 weeks?
That's just Mayo. I was honoured with Adrian and Shane a few weeks ago, and it says, like, we were talking about Mayo's All-Ireland credentials, and they've brilliant league, and they backed it up then with a brilliant performance against Kerry. Although the Roscommon performance was in there in the Connacht Championship, and we thought they'd rub that off. They were going to go all out, and then the struggle with Louth, and they get beat by Cork, and that's Mayo. That's just sums Mayo up so much that they can go from the brilliant to the mundane in a space of weeks. So it's in them, and I don't think it's going to be a season where Kevin McStay is going to be able to work that in one season. I think that if he's going to work the All Ireland, looking at it, it's going to be hard to do it in the one season. He's got to do it over a length of time, and maybe you're talking 2-3 years to rewire that DNA that they have, that the ability just to self-destruct.
Have we kind of underestimated Cork in that group? Because you look at the results that they have, and they're significantly better than probably what Mayo did. I mean, they ran Kerry pretty close. Also at home, they beat Louth, albeit by 2 points, and then they had that great win against Mayo at the weekend. But it's probably the first time anyone's properly mentioned them, and even with that result against Kerry, where there was only the 2 points in it, it was seen more as a flaky Kerry than actually a really good Cork performance.
100%. We've underestimated Cork, I think, but we can only go on what we see. We were going on the league there. We were going on the Munster Championship, and we were probably right to write them off. But if you listen to Jack O'Connor after the game, in an interview after the Kerry game, that he's not surprised. He knew what it was about, and I would chat to Thomas O'Shea the odd time, and he knows, and he's talked about the quality that's in Cork, and they're backing it up slightly. And when you do look about, you have the likes of Hurley and Eamon McGuire and these boys, like they do have the quality. Powder's there as well. So we definitely underestimate, and we probably didn't give them as much credit for the potential they have. They had a bad league, but they have potential.
And they're in the situation where this is maybe not the year where they go a bit further, but that next year it's something that they'll take on. Like, there's enough of the younger lads in there to take this team a bit further.
Exactly, and that's what it's about. That's the great thing about this new format. You look at Westmeath have come on there from winning the Talent Cup, giving a brilliant account of themselves in the group format, and it's up to them to push on. And Cork will be the same. They're not going to get to a semi-final, they're not going to get to a final, but it's up to them now that they have the evidence there that they're a good team, and if they can just back it up now for the next 2-3 years, then hopefully they'll get competitive and be competitive and start winning Munster Championship.
In terms of the teams who have the week off, how important is that bye going to be, do you think? Or at this stage of the season, actually, given how much training and how well conditioned the teams are, is there some benefit to actually playing week in, week out?
There's definitely benefit. It just depends who you ask in terms of that momentum that's built, that you just get a game week in, week out. But I also think there's benefit to watching the teams they're playing this weekend. They're in the shop window, and again, you go back to the point where it's a knockout game. So things are going to be tried that they might have been held back in the group stages, and they might have been in a wee comfort zone. Players are going to show their hand a wee bit more, management the same, and it's an opportunity for the teams in the quarterfinals to get a wee look at, and to rest up and get a wee bit of freshness in their legs, and whatever wee lessons they've learned over the last few weeks, that they can hone them this week, freshen up, hone them this week, hone them at the weekend, freshen up for the week, and really go at that quarter-final. So it just depends who you ask, and it depends what way you look at it.
With Kerry, for example, right, there was a significant factor, I think, a certain cohort who thought that the Mayo thing, the performance was actually indicative of a team that was a little bit off it this year. But they've obviously been able to lick their wounds since against Cork, who they obviously have a special relationship with and always get up for, and that first half performance was good. And then they blow away Mickey Hart's Louth, which would have meant something to the Kerry folk. The fact that it was Mickey Hart and the games in the noughties have scarred them and scarred their football culture so much, even though they won't admit it. So are they back? Are we to assume that they're back, and like Seanie O'Shea's form is back because he plays well against Louth? Or are there still, for you, question marks that they haven't come up against a side?
I'll answer that question after the quarter final if they're back or not. But the big thing is that Seanie O'Shea has picked up and found a bit of form. That was the big thing, that everybody was looking at Clifford. He shut Clifford out, and he needed the Seanie O'Shea's to be standing up. And Seanie O'Shea, when he came onto the scene, was, he very, very good player, and something that, all the gloss of what Clifford done, Seanie O'Shea was outstanding, and they need him. Kerry actually need him, I feel, is maybe not as much as Clifford, but they on that level, just a few percent below it, that they need Seanie O'Shea going as well.
We were talking about Footballer of the Year at various stages. I thought when Galway scored that goal, I was like, okay, well that's a potential candidate for Footballer of the Year. But like, am I just overthinking this? The Footballer of the Year has to be Clifford, because he's already scored, whatever is it, 520 something. Or did those performances against those lower tier teams not count as much just yet?
I think that, for me, Clifford's the Footballer of the Year at the minute, but there's still a lot of football, and there's still a lot of statements to be made in these knockout games, and Clifford will come up against the better quality of man markers. But Clifford is the standout player at the minute. But again, there's a lot of football to be played.
You tweeted last night, Eamon, that you were struggling to pick a favourite for the All-Ireland after that weekend. Having slept on it, do you feel like you're any closer to working out who you think it might be?
No, not at all. I didn't sleep thinking, trying to work out trying to read the form book now, but I definitely don't agree with Ger in terms of having Dublin and Kerry way out there. I think, Galway are probably... If that was a knockout game yesterday, I think Galway would have found a way. To beat our man. Probably would have risked Comer. I think Galway possibly are just a wee bit out there for me at the minute. And I've watched Derry a few times, and I've never walked away from them thinking, right, that's an All-Ireland winning team there now. But when you look across the landscape and you see what's out there and the different teams that are probably in contention, like, have any of them put up their hands? So maybe Derry could be could be building up a wee bit of momentum here.
All right, Eamon, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Cheers.
That's Eamon McGee giving us his thoughts on the games at the weekend. We didn't get to the Tailteann Cup semi-final draws there, but it's Down against Laois and it's Antrim against Meath. Those games are a doubleheader on Sunday in Croker. On tomorrow's show, Shane's back. We've got Ireland against Gibraltar reaction. We've Andy Dunn's depth chart, so we'll be looking at the 10 position. And in a world where Sexton is there, obviously we know Sexton is number one, but if Sexton's not there, who's our number one? Did Ross Byrne do enough, or is there more? Sorry, no Shane tomorrow.
No, it's Adrian in the hot desk. Even though Shane technically is back today, he's just taking another day just to chill.
Right. Do you want to say that again there into the earpiece there, Colin? Plenty more besides. Right now, best of the Sunday pay-per-view, co-Ramblers boss Shane Keegan and chief sub-editor for sport at the Irish Sun, Kevin Byrne, alongside John Duggan.
Time now, though, over the next hour and a half for the Sunday pay-per-view. We're delighted to have in studio the Irish boxing correspondent of the Sun, Kevin Byrne, and the co-Ramblers boss, Shane Keegan. Kevin and Shane, how are you both?
All good, John. Yourself?
Happy Sunday. Happy Father's Day.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, thanks for having us, John.
And great to see you. We'll go through the back pages first. For anybody who's watching on the digital and social channels on Off the Ball, YouTube, Facebook and on Twitter. So got the Sunday Times here. Keep on running. How good can Ireland's Rashida Adeleke become? Second best, Donegal beat Monaghan to claim runner-up spot in Group 4 and home advantage in preliminary quarter-final. Kenny, I didn't get the players to the level they need. The fallout from Ireland-Greece, which will be the topic of conversation for the next 20-25 minutes. The Sun Independent sports section. Tip on fire. Offaly crumbled to record defeat as Cahill's men set up a clash with Galway. They scored 7:38, which is not a time of day. It's actually a hurling score. Absolutely ridiculous, folks. I'm sorry. Kenny clinging to rock of Gibraltar victory. Ireland manager not concerned about his own position, says Dan McDonnell. Paul Kimmage, it's not Bono's fault. Lance took him for a ride. And James O'Connor fault lies with Clare after last weekend's defeat to Limerick in the Munster final. We have the back of the Sunday World sports section. No can do. Down Irish manager not concerned about his position, as he says harsh reality has hit his players. Kingdom reign on the line. This is about the Kerry Louth game. New boss will not fix Ireland, says John Aldridge. And Gelsenkirchen to Greece and Odyssey. Roy Kirsch on 35 years with the boys in green. Obviously we're at the low ebb of that at the moment. We have the Irish Daily Mail on Sunday. Decision time. FAI have call to make on Kenny's future as Allardyce and Keane linked to interim role. The Leeds double act. Philip Quinn writes there. Donegal savage season. Philip Flanagan. Jack the lad. Let's enjoy Grealish's free spirit in an age of robot footballers. Something that Shane Keegan will obviously identify with. We have the Sunday Mirror. Roger that, I'll be back. Brendan Rodgers said to get the Celtic job confirmed tomorrow. Kenny between rock and hard place. Gibraltar game is now do or die for under fire manager Stephen. And City will chase 150 million riches in new elite club competition. Classic summer story for your football readers. Graham Garrity, you can guarantee Mickey Hart will have plenty of tricks up his sleeve to try and rattle the kingdom today. The cash for Rash, so it appears that Marcus Rashford's going to become Man United's top earner on $375,000 a week, which is what David De Gea is, and De Gea's contract expires and he's been offered a new deal on what Rashford is on, $200,000 if he wants to stay. Put Brenda Paper, Brendan Rodgers said to be confirmed as the new Celtic boss tomorrow. And Rock and a Hard Place, which is the headline of choice in your paper, Kevin. Falter against Gibraltar and Stephen is out, writes Neil O'Riordan. I think that's obviously the place to start. Shane Keegan, there's so many articles, and I would call them almost beat articles and not really analysis articles on the 2-1 defeat on Friday night. And what I did notice, nobody's really coming out and saying that this is just a blip. This is very serious now, for obviously from a sporting perspective, for Stephen Kenny.
Yeah, as you say, there is a hell of a lot of pieces, that's for sure. And I suppose I don't think there's any of them really coming out swinging for Stephen, if we're honest, and that's understandable. I think it's just the varying degrees at which people are placing him under pressure. Some are quite measured, others are going in a hell of a lot stronger on it. Yeah, I suppose if to start with the piece, I enjoyed, if not, well, I probably did agree with Paul Rowan's piece to a certain extent, to be honest with you. I found his quite interesting. He starts, John, with the opening story, which I had heard last week from people in those circles. So just to read it here, very opening paragraph. Keith Andrews got quite animated during an intensive training camp in Turkey last week when some of the media watched on as Ireland went through a dead ball routine with Will Smallbone in the all-important quarterback role. The journalists were asked to look elsewhere and remain stum about Stephen Kenny's best-laid plans to dismantle Greece, a request which they were happy to adhere to in the spirit of goodwill. So I like that as a start. It kind of sucks you in straight. It gives you a little bit of a sneak behind the curtain. And as I say, I had heard a little bit of talk around that last week, and that maybe the journalists knew more than they were ideally supposed to know. But we're kind of sticking with the line of keep it to yourselves kind of a thing. Paul goes on to make a few different points on it. He talks about the Liam Brady line of this being the worst group of players that any Irish manager has had to work with in, how long did he say it, ever? Or well, in his lifetime, in his lifetime. And his take on that was that he felt it let Stephen off the hook a little bit. He is one of the people in all of the articles who is definitely that bit harder on Stephen. Now, he does credit, I don't know if credit is the correct word to use, but he does somewhat credit Stephen with at least being completely open and honest about things. And again, for people who didn't see Stephen's comments after the game, I saw a lot of Twitter reaction, I suppose, social media reaction straight after the final whistle, saying, wait till you hear the bull he's going to come out with now, and false optimism and all that. And he certainly didn't. Like, to be fair to him, John, he certainly didn't. His own quotes were, it was a harsh reality for some of the players who played below their levels, Kenny said. That's my responsibility. That's my job to get them to the levels they need tonight. So we're disappointed with that. It's often been the case at difficult away venues where the home team will have a lot of the ball and exert pressure, but we've got to find a way to defend better, and that's probably what's killed us. He didn't hide behind it. He didn't try and come out with he didn't really try any sort of pick me up.
Didn't try to sugarcoat it.
No, he certainly didn't. Before I move on to the last bit that probably caught my eye on Paul's piece, I mean, I did a summation piece myself, kind of more so based around stats and kind of a few graphics that showed a couple of the areas that I thought we struggled in. But the first point that I'd make above all else, John, is, and this is not a hindsight statement, because I had to do a podcast last week where I said it before the game, like, I didn't give us a hope in hell in this game. I genuinely didn't give. I could not wrap my head. I think it was on with you last week with Johnny Ward, actually.
Yeah, you were trying to be given the realistic view.
I couldn't wrap my head around how people expected even a lower ranked team win that game. Lower ranked by about 3 places, I think.
Yeah, 40 to 51, I think.
Yeah, and a lower ranked team who are definitely underway to going ahead of us, that's for sure. I'm not really fully sure how those rankings are done, because, as I say, I had to do a preparation piece on this and watch.
Were you then not too adventurous in our team selection?
100%, and that's the bit that is impossible to fight Stephen's corner on, in that I was positive with Igbene out, I was sure he would go for like for like replacement, and by that I mean somebody who can, yes, get close to Evan Ferguson when we had the ball, but would absolutely have to fall in to a midfield 4. One of the 3 midfielders would shuttle across to one side. I thought that would be Knight. It ended up being Smallbone, but if you had a Knight/Smallbone shuttling across to one side when we lost the ball, a strike partner for Ferguson who has the energy and want to drop off to the other side, now you've got your 5-4-1 out of possession, and I was sure that's the way he would go. Now, rather than just say, oh, he made a big mess of that, like, I'm intrigued. I don't think, maybe I missed it, did any of the journalists really push Stephen on why did he go with that selection? Because whatever you think of Stephen's a really deep tactical thinker, okay? It didn't work, but he obviously felt it would work and had his reasons for thinking it would work. To me, I would have thought, no, I can't see how that will work. So I would love to hear, Stephen talk about, well, here's why we went that way. Here's what we were hoping would happen. Here's how we hoped the game would play out. Because because as I say, you can be sure he can give a reasoned argument as to why they went with that setup, but the simple fact is, and all the numbers show it, the improvement in the second half. Now granted, okay, how much of the improvement was them sitting off and just defending their lead, but all of the underlying numbers, our possession went way up, our passing accuracy went way up, their XG came way down, all of the underlying numbers. Too late though, and that's what I'm saying. It is, you would have to wonder, as good and all as they were, and I thought they were really, really good, and I thought they would be really, really good based on what I'd seen before heading into the game, because we always look at a threat on set pieces. If we had gone with that kind of 5-4-1 shape and made it a really, really tight game, could we have managed to steal something from the game based on almost set pieces alone? You would like to think that you possibly could have.
So the writing, Kevin, that you've gone through is anything that apart from Paul Rowan's piece?
There's a lot of pieces stick out. If you're a struggling international manager, and obviously Stephen Kenny saw this as a must-win game, but the last time you want to be playing this must-win game and it goes wrong for you is a Friday, because the Sunday papers are absolutely chock full of stuff on them, from quotes pieces with Kenny, quotes pieces with Gus Poyet that are quite damning against Ireland's tactical approach, to defences offered up by some of his frontline players, which are then kind of poo-pooed by the journalists who interpret the quotes. Like you were saying, John, it's got a bit of everything. It's got some more measured analysis pieces and then some damning ones. I found the most damning one probably coming from Tommy Conlon in the Sunday Independent. He
would be quite generally fair.
It's a fair piece. I wouldn't say it's unfair. He makes lots of good points. He says it was a 5-1 beating disguised as a 2-1 scoreline, and I think, like Shane, to go back to your point, we did wonder why it wasn't a tighter game. I can only guess that Adam Ida is the greatest behind closed doors footballer ever. He must have been tearing it up in training, because there must have been something. One thing I can't figure.
I saw somebody make the point. I'm not sure who it was. Possibly on air with you yesterday. Was it somebody making the point?
David Connolly and Gary Breen.
David Connolly made the argument that maybe was it out of blind loyalty, the fact that Ida turned up the last day even though he was injured?
Yeah, it was a suggestion. It could have been that way. I'd
be surprised
from David that we needed to have a game rather than a train camp. Look, we're all Monday morning quarterbackers when we lose.
An issue that's been frustrating me with the Stephen Kenny reign has been obviously the inconsistency of results, and it's something that Neil O'Riordan is good on in the Irish Sun. He talks about there's 33 games for Stephen Kenny, and he talks about how the first 11 games, no wins in the first 11 games, including an embarrassing home defeat to Luxembourg, and then just one loss in the next 11 suggested a corner had been turned, particularly as that loss was to Portugal and Cristiano Ronaldo in a game that went wrong. But in the 11 since, Ireland have won 4, drawn 1 and lost 6. Only one 3-0 victory against Scotland was accompanied by an impressive performance with Armenia and Latvia, then beaten 3-2 and Malta 1-0. But it's the inconsistency as well. And when we look back at that 3-0 victory over Scotland, which was probably the best moment of the Stephen Kenny reign, I think, and you had Obafemi and Troy Parrott tearing it up front. For this game we had Adam Ida and Evan Ferguson. I think Evan Ferguson's emergence has given the next manager a boost, but Stephen Kenny almost a problem, because he's been moulding a front line for a couple of years. Like, for many of our best games, Callum Robinson has been in the team. Michael Obafemi's had his moments. Troy Parrott, I think, had he not been unavailable at the start of his reign, might have double or treble the number of caps at this stage, and his career might be looking quite different. So I don't think he's ever found the right mix up front. Ogbeni then emerged and became a really viable selection, and like against France was one Ireland's best player, and Seamus Coleman had a great game then as well. Neither of them available for this match. See, he's not a very lucky general, is he, Stephen Kenny? But the inconsistency of the team and the selection, and kind of just let Ireland down the other night.
But exactly, yeah, because regardless of and we do have probably more attacking talent than we've had before. Let's be honest. There are, look at the names Kevin has thrown out there. An awful lot of those players show an awful lot of promise, but from my point of view, when you line up with wing backs, okay, sometimes some papers or some teams will call it 3-5-2, some will call it 5-3-2, right? Which one of those two formations it ends up being is down to which team has more possession and has the capability to control the game. So if you're playing with wing backs and you can control the game, your team will be 3-5-2 in shape. If you're playing with wing backs and you can't control the game, your team will be 5-3-2 in shape. And if they end up getting pinned back as they did, you're in trouble straight away. You're giving the fullbacks a huge amount of room to come onto. And I mean, I find it amazing that if you having looked at Greece for a couple of their previous games, I mean, there was only ever going to be one of those midfield threes who were going to come out on top in terms of who controlled the game. There really, really was. So again, I'll come back to it again. If we take it that we're not able to gain control of the game if we go 3v3 in the midfield, well, why have we gone 3v3 in midfield? Surely we go with a more conservative 4. It did seem a surprising one for me.
I think our inability to get the better of teams in and around our level
or weaker has undone previous managers and is currently undoing our manager at the minute. We lost the match to France, but it was maybe the best performance of the Stephen Kenny reign, and it felt like in the stadium that night nearly every member of the audience watching would have taken a bullet for Kenny, and that's one match ago, and now you're only as good as your last performance. And I think it feels like people have kind of turned on. Tommy Conlon makes a good point. He says it is a thoroughly baffling scenario, never mind the previous 10 days, which he talks about the great camp that Ireland have supposedly have to prepare for this must-win Greece match or need a result Greece match. He says the previous 3 years had been building up to a night like this. The cultural transformation, the technical revolution, the modernising project were finally supposed to culminate in a national team that would be elevated to another level in terms of performance, confidence and results. And I guess the big experiment kind of fell flat in Greece the other night.
Yeah, Roy Curse is writing today, just a big fat Greek hiding. Just quotes, some of them are quite funny actually, in a gallows way. In a search for solutions, the Irish capo could hardly have appeared any more confused or forlorn if he'd been tackling the crossword where the clues were presented in the local Cyrillic script. This was a night that washed the colour and credibility from the Kenny delusion when the pendulum of public opinion finally swung away from hallucinatory acclaim. Loose in defence, invisible in midfield, paperweight in attack, profligate in possession, disorganised about the ball, Kenny's crew more closely resembled a ragtag bunch that had spent the week on the tiles with Jack Grealish rather than an expensive organised training camp in Turkey. So, look, I found it a funny line. Obviously, it's not a funny
I think it would be easier for the supporters of Kenny to put it down as, look, people have, teams have bad matches. If there weren't so many kind of in the recent history of this team.
Yeah, and you see, my argument there is, right, and I suppose I have one more paragraph highlighted from Paul Rowan, where and the reason I've highlighted is this from me to hold my hand up and say that he's talking about me here essentially. So he has said the rump of Ireland fans who remain loyal to Kenny are so heavily invested in the Kenny project that they will probably let their hearts rule their heads for a little while longer. Okay, so I am wondering, okay, do I fall into that cohort of people?
I fall into that bracket, Kenny FM, that's sure they call us here.
Yeah. And
but I think that, the rationale behind that is that you saw a certain style of football played for a long time. I thought Euro 2012 was an absolute disaster for Ireland. We qualified for a tournament and we are just terrible, absolutely terrible. And if you're thinking that you would have a style of football that is easy on the eye, progressive, that Stephen Kenny would have had success with at Dundalk and other clubs, that philosophy he would do well at the under-21s. He could kind of, if we could play good football and then bring that competitively to tournaments, then there's something I'd be prepared to get behind. And there's not much has been written about it today. There's not that much macro analysis, and it'll probably come in the next week, of the conditions that we're in, the FAI being in such debt, the lack of a shirt sponsor, the brand being rehabilitated, the fact that they've gone to the government with 863 million of an ask for the next 15 years, the lack of facilities, the really dilapidated nature of League of Ireland grounds, the lack of academy structures. We've spoken about Lee Carsley on the show yesterday as a promising under-21 manager of England, who's been linked obviously with the Ireland job, and the resources they have there obviously buttressed by the Premier League's finance. There's a huge macro element to this that I don't think it matters who the international manager is, and sometimes we need to get real about that.
Yeah, it's a very good way of putting it. I mean, if you come on to the conversation of stick or twist, right, I would still be on the stick side. I would. Like Kevin makes the point of previous results. I felt, not that it's my job, but I suppose it's because of the prism that I'm looking at things through, I felt in almost all of the other poor results, I could put forward an argument in terms of a defence for Stephen, or he had suffered a hell of a lot of bad luck in certain games, or there was green shoots in certain games. This performance is the one that I have no, I find it very hard to put forward anything positive for him from the night. Okay, it's the first time that I'm kind of lost for words if I was going to put forward a defence for him, but it's the first time for me. It's the first time.
It's not for Armenia was one time for me, I have to say, last year.
Yeah, I thought we were much the better side against Armenia, and again all the underlying
like Armenia at home conceding 2 goals. It's just, I think for a lot of people that had faith in this and wanted Stephen to do well and still want him to do well, and maybe he can turn around if he does get the opportunity. You cannot trust now us to be consistent.
But is that the manager or is that the players?
But I think when you're talking about teams around you or weaker than you, that you have to have a base level around that.
These boys are not weaker than us. They're not even around us. I'm telling you, I can't wrap my head around it. All it took was to watch their Nations League campaign, and you would see particularly that midfield.
But why France then? Is France just an easy hit then for us in a way, because of the way we just go behind the ball against France and then just make it hard for them to score, and then spend the next 10 minutes or the last 10 minutes going for it.
Yeah, and that's not even Stephen. That's Ireland. It's in Ireland's DNA to be quite good at that kind of performance, isn't it?
France didn't really show up in Dublin either, did they? They didn't get a kick.
They were poor.
They didn't do anything in Dublin. Whereas Greece were frightening for the first 15 minutes.
Gus Poyet was made to look like Pep Guardiola tonight.
But Greece really, came out of the blocks, and their fast start. Gus Poyet's
players have a lot to do with that as well. Though. I think,
they look very technically slick on the ball.
Oh yeah,
far more so than us.
Keep an eye on this Greek team over the next while. I'm telling you, I think they look very good.
And their supporters not even bought into it. Yeah. And that's the thing, is our supporters have been bought into this thing. Well, people might be snary about the whole people that have been supporting Stephen Kenny, but you can't ignore the enthusiasm that has been there at Lansdowne Road in recent times.
And I think that kind of is tied into something Shane's speaking about there. Like, you are the Irish football cohort, and I think that Kenny has clearly mended a broken link between grassroots football in Ireland and the international football team and the people who attend the football matches, the international matches in Ireland. You can see the optimism, and there is still probably a groundswell of people in Ireland who support him, but it's the youth and the optimism can't always get the job done. It's something Poyet spoke about. Like, Dan McDonald probably gave a great breakdown of him in the Sunday Independent, and you can kind of nearly feel Gus Poyet nearly patronising the Ireland team, but trying to be sympathetic as well. He's talking about the inexperience of youth. He's saying, I've been there. If you have 3 points or 6 points, you must win. There's tension. It's tough. You need a group who's been playing I don't know how many years. It is difficult. I've been in that situation, and it's not for everyone. So he's almost like looking at the Irish team going, you needed to win here, and you picked a bunch of kids against my team. And Daniel McDonald just summarised it by saying, in his own way, Poyet had offered a damning verdict of Ireland's capabilities, a team that appears to be trying to do something different without the belief or experience to really implement it. He didn't say it explicitly, but on Friday night, Kenny's side were easy to play against, and I think Poyet knew that to break down Ireland was to target them early and batter them and maybe drain their confidence really early, and getting the goal back was almost miraculous from an Ireland perspective.
Just to bring you up to date, folks, on the Gaelic game scores: Dublin won 13, Sligo 4 points, and Roscommon won 6, Kildare won 4. So at the moment, Sligo are going out, and Louth are going out as well, because they trail Kerry now 111 to 2 points. This is a backlash from Kerry today. Mayo 5 points, Cork 5 points in the football round robin. There's a couple of things I would have noticed as well. Has the constant change in coaches, now let's not talk about their ability of the coaches here, but Damien Duff, Anthony Barry, John Eustace, John O'Shea, has that been a negative for Stephen Kenny?
No doubt about it. Absolutely no doubt about it. It's so far from ideal. You get somebody in there, both in terms of, there's two reasons why it's a negative, John. There's the work on the training ground, and in terms of continuity of how they're coached and the style of play and all of that, the constant chopping and changing is definitely a drawback. And then there's also the ability to grow bonds between people, and again, the fact that person keeps turning over, and like any manager will tell you that the bond between the coach and the players is almost always stronger than the bond between the manager and the players, because the manager is the one who annoys them and rubs them up the wrong way by not picking them. The coach is always able to soften that blow for them a little bit. Players will always get closer and have a better bond with coaches, almost always anyway, than they will with the manager. So the fact that person has kept turning over and it's a different person all the time, that definitely hasn't worked in their favour. I suppose on the sticker twist, because I think it's worth coming on to the twist in a minute, just in terms of some of the names that are being thrown out there.
This Allardyce Keane thing is just like I can't do this anymore.
I'll come to that. That's definitely the one that I want to talk about. All right, just on the stick, right? The last thing I'd say on the only kind of positivity that I can come out with for Stephen on the back of things, right, are you look at the Matt Doherty comments that I'm looking at in the Mail here, right? I understand, I'm not stupid, John, I understand no current player is going to say their manager should be sacked, all right? But at the same time, there's different ways in which you can answer the question. You can give a kind of a PC correct answer of, oh no, we're behind him and we'll stick with him and we're all there for him, and then leave it at that, right? Like, to be fair, Matt Doherty has been a hell of a lot stronger than that. He says they are absolutely the right people for the job. We are prepared unbelievably well. They do everything for us. Behind the scenes, the staff, the manager, Keith, Shazy, Dino. For me, they are absolutely the right people, and I don't even know how there can be speculation there. Like, and he comes out with a few more comments as well after that. You know, I don't think a manager who has lost the dressing room doesn't get people coming out swinging that hard for them. I do still believe he might have, you know, a larger portion of the Irish public might now be against him, and a larger portion of the Irish media might be now turning against him, but I do still believe the players might be there for him.
I suppose the only people that matter really are the FAI board, and it's whether they have in their own minds justification for it. And like, to be honest, like, if you read all the writing today, it's looking pretty bleak. It's looking pretty bleak now. There might be a stave execution, like to encompass the Dutch home and away games, the Greece game at home, maybe a playoff if we get through this convoluted Nations League system. That's not still out of the question. You don't think it's going to happen?
Not
you've gone through, you've crunched the numbers.
Before a ball was kicked, if we get into the playoffs, did you see how the playoffs work? I mean, we wouldn't have a hope in hell of coming through that.
We've got to win 2 games,
yeah. Like, before a ball was kicked in this campaign, once the draw was made, our fate was sealed. I couldn't see how we were going to qualify once the draw was made.
Maybe the fate of the team was sealed, but it's the fate of the current team, the manager and the current players under Stephen. You have to see progression, you have to see a degree of performance, and then you have to see 4 wins in 23 competitive games is what everybody's going to point to as a statistic here.
So let's bring in Sam Allardyce and Robbie Keane and everything will be wonderful.
Well,
the only argument for that is, I guess, you still have to pick from the current crop. You're not looking at the pick that Kenny had from when he took over. Aging players, you know, a lot of players past their best. You're still looking at the generation he's brought through, and can a more experienced manager get more from?
Well, we've got a texture in here. I wanted Stephen Kenny to succeed, but it's hard going now. Little to be positive about. That said, I don't fancy the prospect of Big Sam and Robbie and back to Trapattoni type football where we get points but awful to watch, which I'm kind of talking about earlier on. If possible, with coaches like Graham Potter already how to do better with the squad, improve players more than Kenny has.
Well, they would, but they're not going to be interested in the job. So we're left with potentially 2 options that have been thrown out in the media. The Allardyce Keane one, I mean, this is just laughable.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.